Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 187. This one is interesting. You guys can't see on the video here, but we've got a full crowd. We've got some special guests, previous guests actually on the show. Should I list them off?
Yeah, because it's
we got Sean Wilkinson, who's been on a couple times, handful of times. Tim Keim, who's going to be on next week from Perdomo Cigars.
But he's also been on before.
Yes. He's been on before. And then we've got three fine gentlemen from Philadelphia in the house. So if you guys have been on the Bourbon and BS community page, you may recognize some of them. Hopefully they'll be chiming in the comments. Hopefully they won't. We got that guest mic as well. We got Shannon Chapman with the volume on his phone. Just checking in there. Been on Amy Schertzinger, who has been on three times. Yeah. Did I just give you out like you're not supposed to be here? You kind of looked at me like a little panicked. You said my name. All right. Everyone's got the volume on. All right, here we go. Yeah, damn.
It feels like a talk show with this many people in the garage.
It kind of does.
It's a talk show, you know?
We have Karen Zajac back on.
Thanks for saying it right this time.
You're welcome. Thanks for remembering I didn't the first time.
You're welcome.
She was on not too long ago talking about the book that she is completing under the name of Raven Castle. Mm-hmm. And that is still a work in progress, correct?
Unfortunately.
So if you guys are tuning in, seeing her on and hoping that it's a completed project and that she was going to read more from it, do you have anything?
Tonight's not the night. We're not talking about the smutty book tonight.
I already had someone ask about it when they found out you were going to be on. Like, they're like, is she going to read any more from it? I said, I might see what we can do if she's got it with her.
I mean, like, I could.
We'll see where it goes.
We'll see how the night goes.
And then obviously Nate Hill's here as well. So guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Tonight we are featuring in part one something that Karen brought. It is a, well, you tell us what it is.
So Slipknot, the band,
oh hell yeah,
right, has their own whiskey, voila, called the Number 9, which if you guys don't know, there's nine band members in Slipknot. So the main band member that I know of that did the most with this whiskey was the percussionist, who is also known as Clown. He's the one that kind of was really, really into it and did most of the fine tuning, but they were all like, well, Metallica has a whiskey, so like, let's have a whiskey. I'm also not dogging on Metallica, but this is better than the Metallica whiskey, in my opinion.
I don't even know what that one's called. Like I saw they have it.
I don't know. I'm just like Metallica's whiskey. I don't know.
Black. Just black.
Makes sense, But it's a rye, and it comes from Cedar Ridge in Iowa, which was the first distillery in Iowa after the Prohibition. So it's got some good background to it, and I hope you gentlemen enjoy it because I'm going to. Mm-hmm. But apparently it's also really hard to get, but I was able to order a bottle online with no problem. But I guess it's really hard to find in stores. I actually just worked a music festival, Incarceration, up in Mansfield, and I was bartending. Yeah, and Slipknot was playing there.
Music festival is called that.
Correct. It's called Incarceration. Tattoos and metal and incarcerated. Get it? Because it's held at the penitentiary. Anyways.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay. Well, I don't know. But Slipknot was headlining on Friday. It was a 3-day festival, and so they featured their whiskey, which is the Number 9, and then they also have a reserve. So I was bartending the only tent that had the Slipknot whiskey, and it was a blast, but I actually got to learn a lot about it. They had 3 signature cocktails that were named after some of their most famous songs, and it was a hit. I mean, we sold out of every single case. I don't know how many cases we started with, but there was none left by the end of the weekend, and everyone was like, where can you get it? Where can you get it? And I was like, online. Like, you can't buy it in Ohio, but you can get it delivered, but you have to check through the website. But yeah,
which is always dicey too through Ohio, because sometimes they won't allow it depending on the website.
For sure,
because of being a state-run thing. But
on the distillery's website, they list 5 states they don't ship to.
Correct.
Ohio is not one of those, so
Correct.
They do ship to Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I am currently sharing this. Before we get more into that, I do want to thank our sponsors, Tinder Box at Easton, for providing the Viva La Vida Jester size, which is going to be the featured cigar tonight. It's coming from AJ Fernandez. We also want to thank Altadis USA, which I finally finalized. And I say that in a bad way, but after 2020 and everything else, kind of had that gap there. but they have been supporting us ever since, and they are finalizing all the paperwork for another year of sponsorship. So thank you, Josh Bentley, who has been on the show several times. He's been huge proponent for pushing that through. So they're going to be providing us the Upman Nicaragua by AJ Fernandez as well for the second featured cigar. Next week, I assume we're going to be smoking all Perdomos. Fantastic. But we also want to thank Cigar Company as well. The gold and silver are available if you guys want to contact them directly or through the podcast or Tinder Box at Easton in Columbus, Ohio. And they can ship some out to you. There's several, I think, floating around the garage, I'm sure. There you go. So that being said, tell us about this festival.
Wheel?
Incarceration. It sounds like a family event.
It 100%
Yeah,
is
a lot of
family
kids, a lot of like
lots of kids. I'm not exaggerating. There were an odd amount of kids at this penitentiary.
Perfect.
Yeah, there was 97 to be exact, not 98. Get it? Even odd.
Yeah,
I
no,
thought it was
got
funny.
it.
Anyways, no. So it was held
Moving
at the Mansfield Reformatory, which, for those of you who don't know, if you've ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption, it's that old prison that was filmed at, which is currently right next to the active penitentiary. So all the inmates, I'm sure, had a nice weekend of free live music. So that's got to be fun for them. I mean, there were some really cool bands that played there other than Slipknot. Rob Zombie played, and who else played? The Who, that like really badass, like I'm pretty sure they're Mongolian band. Oh, yeah. They have that one song, Wolf Totem, that like the eagle screeches and it makes you feel like you're in Alaska. And no, okay. That was really cool.
Familiar.
I don't know. But it was I mean, I don't really listen to a lot of metal, but I was feeling it. I was like, this is cool. I'm down. I'm
I feel
hip.
like when you're at a concert or something like that, no matter if you like the music, you kind of get sucked into the show.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I was actually really impressed because I've obviously heard of Slipknot and I've heard a couple of their songs, but I wouldn't say like I was ever a fan before. It's not that I disliked them. It's just not my go-to music. But I think they put on one of the best shows that I saw the entire weekend. And they were the Friday night headliners. I'm trying to remember who headlined on Saturday. It'll probably come to me at some point, but
I'd have been surprised if Rob Zombie wasn't one of the headliners.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he headlined Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was the Sunday night headliner and he did a good show too.
Yeah.
Zombie did. Yeah.
I love both of those bands.
Yeah. It was great. Who else was there? I don't know. It's blanking on me, but it was a good show.
Was the band Mudvayne there?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's who it was.
That was headliner?
Yeah,
That's
on
the
Saturday.
one heavy metal concert I've been to.
Saturday. It was
a weird night.
Mudvayne and there was
Real weird
somebody
night.
else that I had heard of that opened for them.
I can't believe that was it.
Nice guess.
Yeah, good guess.
Pulled that one out of your ass.
I mean, that's the only one.
Oh man, I would have to keep thinking. But
This sounds like a festival I wish I was at.
it was fun. They had
I had a bad
so the ink
experience.
part is inside. If you were to tour the reformatory, if you were to go inside, they had different tattoo artists from all over the world set up with their shops to show
Really?
you like, hey, this is the kind of artwork that I do. I know in previous years they would actually do tattoos if you scheduled an appointment. I don't know if they were doing that this year or not. I didn't really get much of a break, but I still think it's a really cool concept and how they bring all of that together. I mean, incarceration, like that's just so punny. Like it's genius. But I think they said that they capped out at like 50,000 people this year, but I know in previous years they had been up to 80. So it's been a really big festival. I know they were keeping the numbers down because of COVID and whatnot and coming back to doing festivals, but it was a sold out show. So
What was that like in an outdoor festival with COVID stuff? Briefly.
So for us as workers, we still had to wear our masks. We still had to get checked for either a negative test or a vaccination card. Everyone else, it was up to their own discretion. You still had to have a negative test or a vaccination card in order to get into the festival, but you did not have to wear a mask if you were a guest. That was up to their own discretion. So as long as you had the little red wristband stating that you went through COVID check, but you couldn't even get in if you didn't go through COVID check. But some people were wearing masks, most people weren't. It was a beautiful weekend. It was bright and sunny and like 80 degrees. Yeah, so they had a COVID check there. Well, they didn't have a testing center. Like the two other festivals that I've worked, they've had like rapid test results where you can go in and they just do the little thing and then they give it to you 5 minutes later if you want to. But this one, you had to show proof of a negative test within 72 hours prior, or you had to show your vaccination card, and then they gave you a wristband that lasted all weekend. So, but if they did, it wasn't anywhere that the employees were going through. It could have been at one of the general entrances, but it wasn't anywhere around us if they had one. But it was cool. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm still
Yeah.
sharing this. Nate, what are you doing?
I'm listening to Karen tell her story.
Cool.
It's a
All right,
great
so
story.
what is it? Oh, we're pouring the bottle. I was going to see it because Clown is the one that has the message on the back of this bottle.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Have you read this?
He's one of the founding members.
Yes, he is.
Just lost their drummer. All right, so this is 90 proof. Very cool label on it. You have that shirt from there.
I
That was
do. They
basically
gave it
labeled.
to me
It's
for
very cool.
working, and everyone was like, "We want to buy that."
Yeah. Yeah, you wore it in the shop. It was a very cool shirt. And it
did,
has
I
that,
did.
that logo on it if you guys want to look that up.
Mhm.
So yeah, just Iowa whiskey, which is unique because I don't see that very often. Trying to see here. Distilled and bottled by Cedar Ridge Distillery,
Mhm.
and that is based out of Iowa. Slipknot and Cedar Ridge Distillery, two groups of people born and raised in Iowa and committed to quality and hard work. We collaborated on Number 9 whiskey, which in addition to Iowa corn, gets some extra spice from its rye content. I hope you enjoy it as much as we do. Live life and always be safe. Cheers, Clown. Nice. Nate, you looked up the mash bill on this, correct?
Yes.
What do we got?
And we talked about it a little bit the other night. Surprisingly, with this being an Iowa product and corn being so heavy in Iowa, you would think that this would have a high corn content, like around that 70%, 51% corn. So it's just enough to be considered a bourbon. And then it's 35% rye. So it's a very high rye content for a bourbon. And
Yeah.
the other 14% is malted barley.
Wow, we got some comments going on here. If you guys are on YouTube, check out Facebook. If you're on there, let's be nice. We got some about the papers. It's not 1940s Germany, I hear. That's I'm gonna try to steer clear of COVID tonight for once, which is good for me. It'll probably come up. But what do you guys think of this? You like it, obviously, Karen, because you brought it and you ordered some.
So actually, I hadn't really. We weren't supposed to try it,
So you
but
tried it.
I did, and I liked it. I mean, I asked my bar manager if I could take home an empty bottle, and he said, yeah, but it had like less than 0.5 ounces in it.
Mhm.
So of course I tried it and I thought it was good. And then I was like, might as well see if I can get some because I knew I was going to be back on the podcast. And I was like, why not? And every time I had brought it up and been like, hey, have you heard of Slipknot whiskey? A lot of people, unless they were like there at the event, have been like, no,
Yeah.
tell me more. And I was like, cool, I'll bring it in. Which is pretty much how you were. You were like, oh, Slipknot has a whiskey?
That is, yeah.
Yeah.
That is how I was.
100%.
I
Oh,
feel
there's
like
no-
there's so many, like the ones that are hitting right now is like with rock stars. I mean, I know Bob Dylan has Heaven's Door. What else is out there? Does anyone help me out? There's a lot of musicians that have been getting behind it. Well, that's, yeah, Cabo Wabo for Sammy. You got
Drake.
Redneck Riviera.
Yeah, we've had that.
That was on.
Drake has one.
Drake has the, what is that called?
I don't know. I'm surprised it's not called the Drake.
The Jonas Brothers have one? Is it tequila?
What is
Okay.
it? What's your other one called?
I don't know.
Vida?
I saw this is relevant to the show if we're talking about spirits in general and celebrities, but there's on Cigar Aficionado there was a video. I don't know if you guys saw the video of Arnold Schwarzenegger
Mm-hmm.
doing the whole tequila thing. And I'm watching this,
Yeah.
and it's like I don't know if like anyone that Michael Herklotz was on the show before.
Oh, that was
Yeah,
hilarious.
Michael Herklotz, who he was on the show back a year ago, but he did a whole thing where he's watching it and just in disbelief. Yeah, exactly. It's just like he took it out of your mouth. But
Why are you rolling
I
it? It
was
was already
watching this and
rolling.
I was like, Arnold named the whiskey or the tequila at the end of the video. He's like, oh, so this is a tequila cigar and it's Lobos tequila. And I was like, that motherfucker, I bet you he either owns or is investing in that. You look it up. Yep. It was just on the last earnings call and everything like that. Him and LeBron and all this stuff. I was like, it It's smart. Yeah, exactly. Because he probably just sold a couple extra cases because of that. And I'm talking about it on the millions and millions of listeners on here.
Want to clarify?
I want my cut.
I want to clarify the mash bill. So this is actually a blend of straight rye whiskey and straight bourbon whiskey. Once it's blended, the percentages I gave are the end result percentages.
That's the way it works.
Yeah,
I got you.
So the bourbon that they used was a higher corn content bourbon than a rye whiskey, but at the end of the day, when they blend it, it's 51 corn, 35% rye in the blend, and it's 3 to 4 year old products.
Okay.
Right.
So Nate, what do you think of this whiskey here?
I like the nose on it. The nose has got a little sweetness, but with some cinnamon to it. But it's not spicy or overly alcohol forward on the nose. But on the palate, it definitely tastes like a young whiskey.
You think it tastes young?
I do.
Why is that?
There's not a lot of depth to it. It just has this very bright characteristic, like sometimes what we get with cheaper whiskeys or like 2-year-old, 3-year-old whiskeys, stuff like that. It just kind of comes across that way on the finish.
On the very, very end, I see what you're talking about, but during like the whole thing, I'm surprised it's only 51% corn because I get a little bit of that corn type of flavor, I think, from it. It doesn't have as much spice, but it kind of transitions through that. It gets a little spice at the end, and then maybe what you're talking about is that young at the very, very finish, but it's all the way at the end.
Yeah.
But I don't think, I believe it, it said 3 to 4 year.
Yes, it's blend of 3 to 4 year bourbon and rye.
I would assume they're using like the traditional barrels just because it doesn't have that real young flavor.
Yeah.
If that's what you were meaning, because I don't get that as much.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Karen, what do you think?
I think if somebody were to hand me this as a drink and say, here, try this, tell me what you think, I think I'd probably be like, wow, it's pretty good. I don't think I'd be able to age it. I mean, I get the 3 to 4 years, but I mean, if somebody was like, this is a 10-year, I'd be like, yeah, really? Like, it doesn't taste like a 10-year to me, but it's not, I don't think it's as, I don't taste it and it doesn't seem as young to me as Nate, but also Nate's probably well more versed than I am in whiskeys, but
very judgmental too.
What I think and what I'm curious about is with how we were just talking about all the celebrities and everything. How long do you think they're going to keep making this whiskey? With all the celebrities making their own tequilas and whiskeys and vodkas and what else and all their own spirits, how long do you think they're going to keep making
successfully?
Well, not even just successfully, but it's just, how long, like, do you think Cedar Ridge is forever going to make Slipknot whiskey, even after the band? Like, as long as Cedar Ridge is around, which they also have wine too, so they've been around for a minute. Do you think they're going to keep making this? And then it plays into the fact that, does this become a collector's item? Does this become memorabilia to the point where then that in itself, if you have a bottle now, is going to make its value rise later?
That's a good point. I'm sure there are people that are collecting it, especially Slipknot fans, right?
Right.
So they'll have it on their bar. I don't know. It's always different. It reminds me of when we had, it was not Nate, it was Dustin, who's involved in the podcast, and then Jake Sanders and I. Jake, if you guys are just tuning in, Jake and I started the podcast together. We met Eddie Russell, and it was one of the things he gave the stories about meeting, Matthew McConaughey for that Long Branch that they do with Wild Turkey. And They signed in that story he gave, among other hilarious details, it was a 3-year contract with both of, like, basically, so that's why there's 2 names on it, Matthew McConaughey and Eddie Russell. So who knows how they do this legally as far as the contract for putting Slipknot's name on it along with that, because I don't know if anyone else out there listening or in the garage, or if you guys hear this later, have you ever heard of, what was it, Cedar Ridge? Have you heard of Cedar Ridge Distillery in Iowa?
See,
I would say most of the time not.
I had never heard of it, but when I was doing my research and I looked them up, I was like, oh, I've seen that label before. And it was familiar to me. And it's, it's not like I can picture exactly when or if I've tasted it, but it's one of those things where maybe I was at a hotel bar traveling and I've seen it, but it was something that definitely looked familiar to me.
Aaron says, as long as it sells, they'll make it. That's
true. But how much is it? How much do they
successful.
need to be selling in order to keep making it? Or will it make it go up where it's going to be they're not telling anyone, like they have a reserve out as well. Slipknot does. But is it like, what if they do like a 10-year and they're just not telling anyone? So then they quit selling it to get people wanting it back more, you can't get Blanton's anywhere. So it becomes automatically higher in value. So then you can't find this anymore. And is that going to boost it up regardless of the taste?
It definitely could. There's definitely merit behind that, obviously, because once something gets popular for whatever reason, collectible, it doesn't matter if it's good or if it's trash, it will have some sort of a following, and therefore value will go up. Bourbon market is one that is very common, as we all know, is that the secondary market is insane. So, I mean, you could see that going where they just want this because it's hard to find. I would say that's the case. I would assume, though, that between the two organizations, if it's a successful winery that has, enough clout as far as what they're doing with the distillery, and Slipknot obviously is a successful band, they had to have worked out some sort of agreement. So if they don't want to renew it, then yes, this would be a collectible item for some people that are big Slipknot fans or even bourbon fans. I would venture to guess it'd be more the band's fans would be collecting this more than bourbon drinkers or whiskey drinkers. That's just my gut feeling there. But if they, to the point of who was it? Aaron Garner, as long as it sells, they will make it. As long as they can keep the production steady and the product steady and say it's selling to whatever their numbers are, and it makes sense for both parties, I would assume they're going to do the same.
But see, then that also brings up, because I had found out about this because we were selling it at their concert. So as long as the states that they're touring in or other countries are allowing them to do that at every concert, then there's no reason that they should ever quit making it.
Right.
But is it going to be something where their main point of sales are going to be from the concerts? Because, they're charging $10, $12, $14 a drink.
Right.
So
I think they're going to have an uphill battle because it's the only distillery in Iowa, and they've only been around for 11 years.
The distillery has, or the winery?
The distillery.
Okay.
They only started distilling in 2010.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and like you said, it's the first distillery in Iowa since Prohibition. So when you think about bourbon or whiskey in the U.S., like obviously you think Kentucky, then Tennessee. We've featured some Ohio whiskeys, some Texas whiskeys. I don't, obviously Indiana with MGP and Starlight.
I was gonna say Starlight. This reminds me of Starlight. They were a winery at first, and now they've been messing with the spirits. It was a brandy first, and then they started now whiskeys. I mean, you could have generations. I don't know anything about this. We should have looked up a little bit of the Cedar Ridge to see what their history is. But if they're a successful organization, I mean, they could be just now getting started with all this stuff.
They have the wines. They do a gin. They do a whiskey that is a 75% corn mash bill whiskey. And it's all Iowa corn. So
makes sense.
It
might be their own, kind of like the guys from Starlight.
Yeah, they have the typical spirits that you would expect from a young, new distillery.
But see,
the gin, the brandy, the vodka, and then a slightly aged whiskey.
But see, then in my opinion, because it is that new, I think that makes it almost taste or seem better because I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty decent. So if they only started distilling in 2010, then I think that's pretty damn good.
Yeah. I mean, this reminds me of, some of the local ones that we've talked to on the show before, they all start with the spirits that are quicker to be able to produce. Right. And if they're not, I mean, they might source it first, but if they're trying to do it themselves, they're trying to age the barrels and do all that stuff, 3 to 4 years makes sense that this would be one of the last products out there, or not just this Slipknot one, but the other ones as well. That is typically the last one to go on the market if they were doing it themselves, just based on the age of getting it out there as a product, because they can't do whiskeys as quickly as they can do a gin or other spirits.
Right.
So that makes sense. Is anyone else drinking this in the audience? Sean, what do you think of it? Because I assume most people that are listening to the show, they have not tried this yet, because I've never heard of it before.
I kind of agree with what Nate says. It's like off the nose, it's really sweet, and when you first start tasting, you do taste that sweetness. But then to me, it's almost kind of like almost bitter at the end. I don't know. It's. I
think that's what Nate's talking about.
Yeah,
being young.
Being young. So, I could see them getting better with age. Obviously, not as they can learn from it and move forward and everything else. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of them, by the way. So I'm like so excited for them. But yeah, it's like I think there's potential in it. And I think the more they do it, the better they'll get.
See, and that's the thing is I haven't tried the reserve, and I know I don't know the years on it, but I know that it sat for longer than 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And it's 99 proof as well.
Okay.
So
This one's 90.
90,
proof?
correct.
Yeah.
Now,
This
can
one's
you
90.
can you get the reserve just like I can get the regular too?
You can, but I didn't buy that because it was $80,
Oh.
and
How much
this
was
is
this?
40.
40.
Yeah,
So
Which-
$40 for the small
Standard
batch,
price
these
$80
days.
for the reserve.
correct.
Which $40, we've talked about this before. $40 for a whiskey that has an artist behind it,
Mhm.
like that's actually more on the lower end
Oh, for sure.
for a spirit or for a whiskey that has a name behind it.
I think
Like,
it has like
Yeah, it
we've-
is.
we've had
it
the
has-
Bob Dylan, the Heaven's Door, and
Yeah.
those are like 50, 55.
Yeah, they are. I'm trying to remember what was it? Big and Rich. Who was it? John Rich was the one on it.
Yeah, that one was only
Redneck.
25, 26 bucks.
Which, if you have the name Redneck on there, I mean, you
Yeah.
can't really price
Well,
that
I
out.
think
you're
it has-
appealing to
That's
blue
just-
collar.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I think a lot of it has to do with their
That's a bad
fans too. I
idea.
mean, you got a lot of most of their fans. I don't know how big they are into bourbon or whiskey, so maybe they want to keep a little bit cheaper for them to try instead of overpricing, and then their own fans can't even do it because they can't afford it.
Yeah, and I can see that because especially when I was bartending the event, they had 3 different cocktails. One was pretty much like their equivalent of like an old fashioned, and then another one had limoncello in it, which is a citrus liqueur with some lemonade, and then the other one had tea and Chambord, which is a raspberry liqueur. And all of them were very good from what we got feedback. I actually didn't try any of those, but most of the fans were drinking the cocktails. I mean, we were the only, there were 2 stations out of the 8 bars that were there. And we had one full bar that had probably like 6 stations. No, 8 stations. And then only 2 stations had the Slipknot whiskey. So out of the entire concert, out of the entire park, there were only 2 stations selling this and selling those cocktails. And we were the only place that you could get them. But most people were drinking the cocktails.
That's what I was gonna ask,
Occasionally,
yeah.
yeah. Well, also you can't just technically have a shot of it at an event like
Let's put
that. You're
rocks
not.
in it.
You had to put a
Yeah.
rock in it. So legally, we had to put at least 1 ice cube in it. But most people were okay with that because we could get a tiny piece of ice and toss it in there, and it's not going to dilute the flavor that much. But hardly anyone was drinking it straight or trying to try it straight. Almost everyone was drinking the cocktails, which makes me feel like, they wanted it because it was Slipknot, but not because they were whiskey fanatics.
When Sean Anderson says, who's been on the show as well, he's pissed on the name of the bottle. What does it taste like? Better determination for price. I agree, but again, the marketing and everything else, and obviously at a show like that, I mean, that's why people are buying it, most likely.
Right.
And so people will see this on the shelf. If they do, whatever states, it's sitting on the shelves. I have not seen it in Ohio. But the fact that you could ship it here is interesting. So it might be showing up here. Who knows what the background is there? But to Sean, your point though is people buy something for either recommendation or they see it, they haven't seen it yet, and they like the label. It's all part of that marketing. Same thing goes with cigars. I think it's just something that's a reason why you put all this marketing behind it, is because you can have the prettiest bottle, you can have the best looking band or box of a cigar, but if it's not good juice or if it's not good tobacco, they're not going to get a second buy. So that's another thing. Would it be short-lived because of that? I don't think that's the case with this one. So $40 for the bottle. I mean, this is something that I think is enjoyable. You can throw it in cocktails, probably makes very good cocktails as well because of the flavor profile. And if you're making it in a cocktail, obviously any of that finish of what we're talking about would be
It's completely gone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you can't tell at
wouldn't
all.
even worry about that part.
I'd be hesitant to drink this on the rocks just because it's 90 proof already, and it does have a lighter color, kind of like a golden honey to it, to the color, but also it's like when I swish it around on the glass, it's not very oily. Like it's very thin and it settles back down pretty quickly on the Glencairn glass I'm drinking out of. And also on the palate, like it just comes across the palate as a thinner whiskey, which again, you would expect for a 90 proof.
Right.
Correct. Yeah. But I wouldn't put like a full glass of ice before.
No.
But an ice cube or two, maybe. But well, it's not going to stand up to any of your barrel proofs or anything like that. But I mean,
No.
again, for a 90 proof, I think that's going to happen with a lot of them, like you're saying.
So I think it's a good bourbon for like making drinks like with cocktails.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Which is again what they were selling, and if they do that at every concert, that's a great pinpoint because it's I got to try it at this one show and it was really good. And the people that are drinking this that aren't like whiskey or bourbon, like really connoisseurs, then they're like, oh, I got to try it. It was good because they had the cocktail. They think it's amazing. And whether or not that's the whiskey or the other flavors of the cocktail, it tastes good. You know, they had a great time. And that's part of the experience when you drink like that is, you know, you're not just looking for the flavor, you're looking for all of it as a whole. For sure. Oh, yeah.
Well, I think it goes into the same thing. You bought 2 bottles after you were working the show. So
Correct.
you imagine that's that kind of residual from that effort is not only that, but it's like how many people were at the show, working or otherwise, that then therefore went home right afterwards, like the next day when they sober up or whatever, you know, recover from a weekend festival. But they're like, I got to find this bottle.
But see, that was
and then there's that memory like you're talking about.
That was interesting though, because we had a lot of people, we had a lot of repeat customers because obviously we were the only 2 stations that were selling the Slipknot. So we had a lot of people coming back because we were also the only people that were selling craft cocktails. Every other tent was doing beer or like, you know, Tito's and then basic mixers. And I don't think they had Bullet. So they didn't really have a lot of options as far as other mixers went. But we were the only ones that were doing like creative cocktails. So that was part of it. But we had a couple people that were like, you know, oh, they don't ship to where I live. They don't ship to where I live.
Right.
There were people in Ohio that were saying, oh, they don't ship to where I live. I don't know how I got it. I don't know if it was luck. I had people saying that they were looking online on eBay and it was selling for $500 because they couldn't find it. And that was the only way that they could get it shipped was privately. And I was like, that's ridiculous.
I'm going to go back to their website and pull up the 5 states because I know
one of them's Michigan.
Yeah, they don't ship to Michigan,
Right.
North Dakota, Kentucky.
And there was a couple others, but I think one of them is it California, maybe? I don't know. But so it just makes me wonder because there were people that were like, yeah, I live in Ohio and it won't ship here, but it doesn't say that it won't ship here. It just wouldn't let me when I put in my address.
Yeah.
So that makes me wonder because I got it with no problem.
Right.
So I don't know where that algorithm or if it's just something automated that comes up depending on where you live or how that works. But I had no problem getting it at all.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, I'm going to buy 2 bottles in case I can't get another.
I think it goes also to the comments of why people buy what they buy. I mean, you have this obviously for you know, you now have a memory tied into it. People have, you know, a big fan of the band. They do all that stuff. But I mean, talking about like, you know, Nate, you said this tastes young. For $40, there's plenty of bottles out there that I would rather drink this one other than those. And they sell like crazy on the secondary because they're tough to find.
Right.
And like, it's just like the value of a bottle of whiskey anymore is if you do it purely, it's based on the age, it's based on, you know, the process that goes into whatever they're doing with it, the rarity, whatever it might be. But a lot of it also has to go in. Why is it, you know, is it marketable?
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it the distillery itself? Is it marketable? Because I think some of the ones, and I know this is different, but like I've got a friend of mine bought a bottle because they saw it, the Ancient Age, which is like $25 for a 1.75, right? And it's like crazy good deal for in my opinion, a decent whiskey for that price. But people geek out about that because it's hard to find.
Right.
And I don't know what that's going for secondary. I'm sure it's not extraordinary numbers, but it's something that like I look at the 2 of those, and if they were about the same price, like this has a better finish than that because it's a little harsher. But again, it's a $25 bottle of 1.75.
Right.
I mean, it's different, but it's, I don't know. People buy for different reasons, and it's so you never know what's going to hit. A couple of people are saying on here that, you know, I think it was Aaron was saying he would never buy one with a band or an artist behind it. And that, in a sense, is I get that buying strategy, but at the same time, you might be selling yourself short a little bit because you might be missing out on something that's very good, and that person just happens to be the one that marketed it. So you just never really know. But again, people buy for different reasons. If I saw this on the shelf initially, I'd say, "Oh, cool label," and I flip it around. I'm like, Slipknot. All right, I'm probably not going to buy it because I'm like, all right, what do they know about whiskeys?
Right.
And I'm just being absolutely naive and ignorant because I have they could be huge whiskey drinkers. You know what I mean?
Right.
I have no idea. Not a Slipknot fan. I don't have any of their albums.
But see, that's so funny because I did it for the exact opposite. I was like, oh, that's a cool label. Slipknot, I'm not even a fan, but why not? Like, why would I not try it? Like, you never know.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of funny. But
Tim Dodge says, I found it online several places. Oh, no, that was the Reserve. He said it was cheapest was $79.99, which is what you said it was as well. So, and see, that would be something where, again, like, oh, this is pretty decent for $40 for double the price. I wonder if that's really that good.
Right.
So now I probably would.
So apparently so there's a distinction between what states they can ship wine to and what states they can ship spirits to.
Okay.
There's a ton of states that they can't ship spirits to.
That makes sense.
There is a lot of them.
Huh.
Well,
but Ohio is one of the ones they can ship to.
Really?
I know.
Which doesn't make sense at all. I was so surprised.
Absolutely the opposite of most.
Yeah, because I mean, we talked with the guys from Starlight last week, and Ohio is one of the hardest states to get your product on the shelf.
We're still considered
Now-
a dry state. Not because we have dry counties. That's why.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Westerville. No,
Didn't know. Westville's not dry anymore.
Guys, I
Not
know,
anymore.
but
It's
we
where it started.
were. We started prohibition. Yay.
Gotta be first, right?
If you ain't first, you're last.
That's right. All right. So Viva La Vida Jester is what we're smoking. What do you guys think of it so far? You've never had this, Karen? Correct?
I've never had it.
Never had
Good
it.
job.
Nate, you've smoked it.
Mhm.
Not many though.
no, but I have smoked this. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it before I get into it?
So
But Karen, why don't you start since you're the
I
guest?
started the whiskey. I
All
want to
right,
hear what
yeah.
Nate has to say first.
Fair.
so
Good dodge.
so it's an AJ Fernandez product, and with the look of the cigar, with how dark the wrapper is on it, I was actually kind of surprised that this cigar wasn't a little heavier. It wasn't too long ago we had the Diaz de Gloria from AJ on,
Yes.
and color wise they're about the same, but that Diaz de Gloria was definitely heavier, I think, than this one. But
As
no,
far as
it's-
strength or
as
flavor?
far as the strength.
Strength. Okay.
This does have a lot of flavor. I put like medium to full body on this. It's got a little spice on the back of it, but it's not overpowering. Not an overwhelming amount of flavor though. And I think that's what you and I talked about a couple Saturdays ago when I smoked one of these in the shop. Like,
yeah.
I was just because it's an AJ product, and I love a lot of the stuff that AJ does. Like, I was expecting just more from this. I was expecting it to hit a little bit more.
Karen.
I gotta side with Nate. I mean, I don't know a lot about cigars, but I was expecting it to be a little bit more, like a little bit more humph with it.
Humph.
Yeah, just a little bit more of a humph. Like,
What-
it's not.
What do you normally like to smoke?
I believe it's oomph.
I say humph. Okay, just let me do my shit. Okay.
My
Okay.
hump.
You say tomato, I say potato. It's fine.
not the same thing. It's not-
Exactly. It's fine. They're different things. I said, anyways. I was expecting, I mean, like you said, you look at the wrapper and you think, oh, okay, it's a little bit darker. I was thinking it's going to be a little bit more sweeter, but like still full bodied. I think it has flavor, but I wish I would have started smoking it before I started drinking because, like we talked about the last time I was on the podcast, it kind of cleanses your palate a little bit, takes away a little bit of that burn. And I wish I would have gotten the flavor before I started drinking the whiskey because I feel like that's diminishing it. And I don't feel like there's enough flavor, but I almost like, for me, I would consider this a lighter cigar. And I know that it's not considered a light cigar, but it's smoking very evenly. It's very light to me. I mean, this is something I could take out on the golf course. I've only golfed once in my life, but
But you can
I
do
could
it
take it out. Yeah. And it'd be
for your
fine.
second time.
For
Do
my
you-
second time, 100%.
Do you
Good,
retrohale?
Yes, I can.
Okay. This has a lot of spice on the retrohale.
Really?
I was gonna get
A lot of
to that
spice.
part,
Yeah.
Sean, what do you
I'll
think?
try that.
You're smoking one.
Yeah, I was gonna say the retro hair has a little bit of a kick to it. Yeah, I'm comfortable with it. It's not blowing my socks off like, oh my god, it's amazing. I mean, it's good, but it's not. It's just kind of there.
Very
Like I'll-
so panel and
Yeah.
audience tonight.
yeah, and Karen, with your
guess the
palate
weather
cleansing of
changed,
that
really.
McDonald's you had,
Wendy's.
I'm
How's it
sure
go?
that really.
They're Wendy's.
Oh,
Spicy
Wendy's.
nuggets.
Oh,
It was
I-
McDonald's the first
Holy
time,
shit,
so you were
I'm
right.
sorry, Wendy's.
Well, McDonald's doesn't have spicy nuggets, guys.
Okay, all right. Well, okay.
It's all about the spicy nugs, man.
But
McDonald's, if you're listening,
Sorry,
But-
you're not tonight's pick.
no, it's,
Ronald.
it's not bad. I mean, I like it's okay. It's not just like I like the
it's a
retro.
Raven review.
The retro. I know. I suck at it.
It's okay. It's not bad.
The retro hail, I did
Burns.
like the spice. I don't mind a spicy retro hail. It's like the first one, couple you usually get, you're like, holy shit. And then after a while, you kind of get used to it.
Yeah.
So then you can get more of the flavor out of it when you get that retro hail. You can get the burn out of the way and you get the flavor. And I think the flavor's pretty good on that. So
Bobby, you've smoked this before, yeah? Yeah. Viva La Vida. Yeah. Why don't you chime in there and what you think of that cigar?
Talk about the cigar, Bobby.
Watch the table there. Watch the table. Watch the table. Watch the table.
Watch the table, guys. Watch the
I'm
table.
going to say the same thing you said, Nate. It looks like it's powerful. It's really not. There's no complexity to it. I don't like the retrohale. I bring it through my nose. I don't like that term, but through the nose you do. Get
So when you
get the
retrohale.
pepper. Yeah, I don't like retrohale.
Yeah. You
Bring
don't
it
like
through
to
my-
retrohale, or you don't like the word
I bring it
retrohale?
through my nose. I don't like the word.
So
It
you
reminds me
you
of
bring it
another
through your nose as you
podcast
retrohale.
that started years ago. I won't say the name. You guys got me on the mic. You okay now? I'll come back later.
All right, we'll check back in with you later.
Drink some more water.
How's the crown tonight? All right, so I agree with the retrohale comment, not Bobby's, but with everyone else's, that it does have a lot of power. Actually, I think it has a lot of power in the retrohale.
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm getting, like you guys talk about
More
the
so
strength.
than the palate.
Yeah, but I think that, I wouldn't say this is full bodied, but I would say it's definitely medium push and full, just because that if you don't retrohale, blow out through the nose, whatever you want to call it, it's something that you're going to miss a lot on this cigar. I would say that, it's kind of drier on the tongue, on my palate. It's definitely a little bit drier. With this whiskey, I think it is smoking a little bit better than on its own, just because of that. Because this is something, I mean, you guys keep saying, like, in Karen, you think it's a not mild, but a lighter overall flavor profile. And to me, I think that kind of dryness, and I don't think it's always a bad thing, because there's some cigars that I think it has like a very dry, bitter finish, and people love the cigar. But for me, it's not always the case. Like, I have to drink a lot of water to get through that cigar and enjoy what I enjoy about it. But there's a lot of that cigar that I don't enjoy because of the way that I have to keep smoking it to try to keep the good flavors going. I'm not saying that this is one of those things, but it is. I'm surprised that everyone thinks it's kind of not as full as it looks, because I retrohale on everything, on every smoke. It's very difficult for me. It burns out a little bit. Bobby asked if it burns it out a little bit. It does. It used to, you know what I mean? And what I'll find is, when I'm smoking a cigar like this, and then I do that, and then I go to a true, like, medium to mild cigar, and then I do a retrohale, is searching for that at that point.
I won't do a cigar I smoke all the time, every day.
It's just the way. I mean, once I started doing the retrohale, and that, guys, you guys don't know what we're talking about. It's kind of what Bobby did kind of allude to there, is that we've talked about on the show before, is that you pull it into the mouth like you normally would a cigar, but instead of, and you don't typically inhale, but you kind of, instead of blowing it back out, there's a way to kind of force that smoke kind of through the back part of your nasal cavity, and then blow it back out of your nose, but you're not technically inhaling it into the lungs and then blowing it back out. It's something that some people get it the first time. Some people do it for years. They still can't do it. And then eventually they'll do it. And sometimes it'll burn the first couple times you do it, just because you're not used to that going through your nose, especially if you're not like a cigarette smoker. This one, it keeps punching me kind of in that nose. Like, it really does. Every time I retrohale, it does punch a lot. So that's why, maybe because I smoke differently, and I mean, like, every time I take a puff, almost it goes through my nose first and then out the mouth. And so for me, my smoking experience on this is a little bit different than you guys, is that I think it's, by the time I'm done with it, it's definitely hit me. So I think it is a little bit fuller, in my opinion. I don't know what they say. It's all Nicaraguan tobacco. As Nate said, it's all AJ. It's all his own tobacco, including the wrapper leaf on this one. So it's all his grown tobacco from his farms.
What kind of wrapper is this?
It's undisclosed, I think.
Okay.
I can't find it on here.
Just
I was
Nicaraguan.
looking it up, but yeah, it's Nicaraguan. So I don't know if AJ's one to kind of do this whole undisclosed. A lot of times in the filler combo, he'll do that. He might disclose the wrapper and the binder, and then AJ proprietary blend or AJ proprietary tobacco. He's been doing that for years. This one, the reason it's called the Jester, just so you guys know, the Viva La Vida it's the same blend as the other Viva La Vidas from AJ. The Jester was one that he made initially for this size for a shop actually in Manhattan in New York City. So they had bought out some of I think the cigar ends. I think it was. Anyways, they did this size in 5-packs. You can only get this size in 5-packs, and it's basically just a 5-pack with paper, but it has that Jester logo on the 5-pack. Doesn't come in boxes, so it's a kind of a unique type
It's a
of
cool
packaging.
logo.
Oh, and the artwork on the band,
It's
and
beautiful.
the detail on it is fantastic. And so that circle, like this front part of the band, that's the big sticker on the 5-pack. It does pop a lot as far as that goes.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
The wrappers are red Habanero Maduro.
Okay, so it's
So it is a Maduro.
probably Rosado. I get red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Colorado?
Like no,
I think Rosado usually. Is
Yeah,
what they call it, but
Rosado Habano.
Habano, yeah. So Nicaraguan Habano, basically. Yeah. Oddly enough, based on our reviews, and I know not everyone agrees with this, but on the 2020 list in Cigar Aficionado, this got number 16.
Wow.
Which I think one of the reasons I brought this on the podcast tonight is because with Tinder Box working there, Tinder Box at Easton in Columbus, Ohio, we brought these on because it scored really well. It had some buzz behind it. And AJ is AJ. So AJ Fernandez stuff sells lights out all the time. This has just been sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Really?
I think that speaks volumes to some of the like retail side or even online. These lists, the Cigar Aficionado especially, but other lists as well, like the top 25s. If you're not hitting the top 5, and I mean, Tim with Perdomo's in the garage too, he'll be on and we can talk to Nick about this as well. I think it's always a phenomenon that everyone thinks that if you're on the top 25, like, oh, you made it. If you're not in that top 5, it's almost a trickle effect at that point. I mean, you may, yeah, if you're not the number 1, that'll get that pop for like 2 months, maybe. And then top 3 and all that stuff. But then other than that, it's like, if you're number 16 on the list, unless people come in and they're looking for specifically that, it's almost, I'm curious what Nick will say next week is like, obviously it's worth it, but it may not affect. I'm curious to see if it affects what it's short term, but it may not even hit your production lines at all. And like, if you don't get the number 1, number 5, whatever, if you're not in the top 5, do you actually change your production numbers for something that hits like a number 16? I would assume probably not. You might wait and see. I don't know.
I think one of the reasons this may be sitting on the shelf at the Tinder Box a little bit, the price point may have something to do with it.
Yeah, so it's suggested retail is $11.50, so you're looking at $12 to $12.95 or whatever, depending on what's in Ohio. You're looking at about $12.50. Basically 12 to 13. Let's call it.
Yeah.
For this particular size, and it is a Robusto. It's a 5x56, so it is a stout Robusto size as far as the ring gauge. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It could.
Because I'm thinking of some other AJ products that the shop has carried. We have the Upman by AJ here for the second cigar. We've got the New World, and the New World is that $7 to $9 type of price point, and that's a really nice medium full, pushing full body smoke with a lot of flavor. We did the Diaz de Gloria, and we really enjoyed that cigar. The Ramon Alones, I absolutely love. I think that's my favorite AJ blend is that Ramon Alones, and that's $1 more than this one.
Yeah, AJ is coming out with especially his own stuff. I mean, for those that aren't as well versed with AJ, made his name big time online with the Diesel line and with the what's the other one? Art of War. Man of War.
Like the horse.
Oh man. Man of War. So that is one. Can't cry over spilled water, but maybe the whiskey. Yeah, Philly boys.
That wasn't Philly.
All you had to say was that you didn't like it. You don't have to spill it over. It's
You have
fine.
to throw your glass on the down.
They live in Philly. They're not from Philly. But when AJ Fernandez, his own stuff that has his name on it, unless like the San Lotano line, a lot of them are coming out with that higher price point.
Okay.
He hasn't really gone full blown like we've talked about Plasencia on here, where like the stuff with Plasencia's name, like a lot of their line with their name on it,
15, 20 plus.
They've got higher price tags on it. Where like AJ, I think, is starting to creep up with some of these now. To call it the Viva La Vida, to put a Jester on there, to have that, even though it is very cool marketing, that's not gonna, I don't think, drive a $15 to $20 price tag. I don't think, just that marketing by itself. But he has the ability to put out some cigars with the stuff that he has and the age that he's able to put on some of the tobacco. He can start putting out some that will really go against people that know AJ Fernandez cigars, whether it's Altadis products, his own Diesel line, or the Man of War. Yeah. Any of that stuff, as soon as they start hitting that $15 to $20, that's going to be something that he has to really battle with to get people to smoke it as his premier lines.
Well,
so I think he's creeping up to that point. In the next couple of years, I think we'll see some AJ releases that are going to be $15, $20, $25, that these are going to be vintage stuff that he'll probably be putting out. I would not be surprised in the next probably 2 years, maybe 5 at the most, that he might just be like, I'm going to come out swinging. Placencia did it. You know, some of these other companies are doing it. I don't have the Cohiba name or any of the big, you know, as far as those even boutique that are higher. He's made a reputation for being a more reasonable price cigar, yet very good consistency and good flavor. If you're buying an AJ Fernandez cigar, you're going to have a good experience typically.
Yeah. A lot of his stuff was coming in, you know, that $9 to $12 price point. And then when he came out with the original New World, like the New World was a little bit under $9. It was kind of that, depending on the size. And
we had the Robusto on the shelf for about $6.50.
Yeah. I mean, so you had that shot, you had that cigar like $6 to $9 price point. And so initially when the New World hit the market, like people were going right after it because it was AJ. They love AJ. And now he's coming out with a single digit price point cigar. Like people were going after that. And then he came out with the Last Call, which was, you know, more of a $5 to $6 cigar. And a lot of those were shorter smokes, but people, again, because it was AJ and knowing how good his tobacco is, to, you know, get one of his cigars, you know, $5, $6, $7. Once he came out with those two lines, like a lot of people started really jumping on board with, a lot of people just started jumping on board with those two lines because they were, you know, under that $10 price point.
Well, see, that's strengthening is what I'm saying is that when you make a name for yourself with a lower price point, it's tough to get to those higher because you don't have those buyers. The Last Call buyers may try something for a good, like, oh, it's AJ, but they're not buying it for their everyday smokes.
No.
And that's where I think that, you know, he has obviously seemed to have built a very successful business as well over the not budget, but that good bang for your buck cigars. And he just pumps them out. So this might be kind of that transitional phase for him. And obviously there was a couple shops that thought they liked the blend enough that they want to do something special with it. And like I said, I think I'm having a little different smoking experience because of the way I smoke with the retrohale on this one, but it's got something to it. But I will say, I don't find the complexity in this blend that I find in some of the other ones that he puts out.
Yeah, it's
like the Ramon Ayones that he puts out. You know, I think that had all the right in the world. That if you're going to, that was a project through General Cigars that they secured the rights to that Cuban brand Ramon Ayones. And then basically gave it to AJ, and AJ's like, well, I'm not going to put out a cheap cigar, even though Ramon Ayones a lot of times is a less expensive Cuban cigar if you're buying them. But just an ode to that, it was a great cigar that I think deserves that $13 price point.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think this one does too, probably. It's just maybe, obviously, as we're going around the garage, it's not really for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, for this price point and being from AJ, like the first couple times I smoked this, because I've had the Jester, and then I believe I've also had the Toro that the shop carries. For that price point, I think I was just going into it expecting a little bit more than what I got out. And that's probably more my mistake. Like I was smoking that cigar thinking I was going to get something similar to a Ramon Ayones, which is my favorite AJ cigar.
Which is also kind of, I mean, it's not your fault, but I mean, that's you going into it assuming what you're going to smoke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a problem.
And that was my bad.
I mean,
but then again, I also sat there and it's like, okay, I like AJ. I like this cigar. I might go to this cigar more if it was a buck or two less.
Like Ramon Ayones sits around because it sits on a shelf for everything's $6 to $9, and it's in that higher price point.
Yeah.
Ramon Ayones, yeah. Bobby's saying that. If you want to talk, you got a microphone here, by the way. No, they need to hear you.
Otherwise, we have to repeat what you say. Where's your phone? Just put it on the.
So, Karen, you're saying you're learning obviously more about cigars. After hearing all that talk, would you agree? Does it change your perspective of it? Because not knowing as much about AJ Fernandez products.
Right. So after we kind of, did the show and tell, went around the room and we all gave our opinion, I retrohaled a couple times, and it definitely opens it up. You're right. Me being a newer cigar smoker, as in like 2 years, I am pretty much, you put something in front of me, I'm going to smoke it. I'm going to like it. I'm still like trying to get more versed in cigars and learn more about them. But it definitely adds more of that flavor that I was missing. So for people that don't retrohale, kind of like you were saying, it's something that I need to remember to do every time that I smoke a new cigar. Like you said, I know you don't, you're laughing because you hate that word, but Oh,
Well, and-
okay.
and-
I was
and
like,
you-
He
and
also
you-
likes hearing that he's right. So
Well, and,
Yeah.
and when you when you've been in the shop,
complex
you
there.
typically go towards that medium to full body smokes.
oh, for
When,
sure.
when you were on 6 weeks ago with Jack Tarano, we were smoking the Murcielago,
Yeah.
and that's a very full body peppery smoke, and you'd love that blend.
I do. I love that stuff. I mean, if I can smoke it, as I would say, like regularly, if I can get a big, good flavor, that's what I like. That's what brings me back to a cigar. And I'm trying to get to the point where, I don't go for my normal, now that I know how to smoke cigars, I don't want to just go for the same thing every time. I want to become, like I said, more well-versed, and I want to try different things. and
Broaden
learn
your
more.
palate.
Right. And I want to learn more about tobacco. And, we sat down one time and we were talking about, the different levels of
yeah,
tobacco
different
and
primings. Yeah.
and the plants and how they're grown and where the different tobacco comes from, which is all really interesting to me. And I appreciate that because, when you look at bourbon and you're like, oh, okay, this is corn and barley and rye. This is how it creates this flavor. And then being able to apply that to the cigars, I think is why so many people put them hand in hand, is because they have that similar art form.
Mhm.
Obviously, they taste very, very good together. But definitely after retrohaling a couple times, it opens up even a bigger flavor on my palate for me when I smoke it regularly. What is that? Does that have a proper term when you just smoke it instead of retrohaling? Is it just
I don't know if there's a term. I mean,
You're
it's just
smoking a
obviously you're
cigar.
not-
okay?
Yeah.
Well, when I'm just smoking it, it's I think it definitely added a lot of flavor to it. It has more of I would say like the bolder notes, like you were first saying, that I wasn't picking up on. And yeah, I think that's actually really unique, because just being here and talking about it, and after hearing everyone say that and being able to try it, that was really cool for me anyways, to be able to see that instant change of what I thought I was missing in the beginning. So it's cool.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. That's good stuff. I think this is, again, as I'm smoking this now, I'm about halfway, I'm almost getting towards the band. That's, I think, why, because of the way I smoke with that retro every time and having a little bit of that punch and
Mhm.
the oomph or the humph, as you
Right.
said it. This is
Humph.
something that
Humph.
I'm getting that every time. It's not going away. Even drinking a whiskey or any, like, it just keeps getting me every time, and it's a very powerful retrohale to me. And it's one of the reasons I like it. It's also one of the reasons I don't care for it, because it's a lot. I get it a lot. I mean, it's a punch every time.
Humph.
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 Nate says, "Not." What'd you say on the comments?
It's a hump through the nose, right?
We're not talking about that kind of fun stuff tonight.
Oh.
Remember?
Not yet. Not yet. This is the time, guys. I want to talk about the ratings. So at the end of part one, and for you that are staying tuned, or if you're listening on the audio, make sure you click on part two for this episode, because we're going to be talking about in part two education, pretty open topic. So we're going to see where that conversation goes. Very interested on that one. But so we're going to do out of 10 ratings, the whiskey out of 10, 10 being the best, cigar out of 10, and then the pairing out of 10 as well. Just how it all goes together. Sean, you grab the mic. You want to chime in on this?
Sure.
Sure, you grab the mic. Like,
Sure.
oh, thanks for asking. Feel
For
like you forced
me,
my hand.
no. 777s across the board. Just
Jackpot.
I think it's easy. It's not. I mean, the one thing I do like is very well constructed. The cigar is. It's definitely got good smoke, and it's not falling apart on me, which I will give them that. And like you said, the retrohale. If it wasn't for that, I think it would just be a regular cigar, just kind of like a ho-hum cigar. So I'd probably get it again, just because of the fact that I don't know retrohale as much as you do, but like maybe one, like every other one, I'll do it. So to kind of bring the flavor back. And like I said earlier with the bourbon, I mean, I think the novelty of it, because of Slipknot, and I'm a big fan. I think it's cool for people who are fans that are into that. I think it'll be a good thing for them. I like to try the reserve just to see
Yeah,
how
I'd
much
be
better it
interested
is.
too,
Yeah. But just kind of all the way across the board. I mean, it's when you do the retrohale and it's a little bit stronger with the kind of milder bourbon, it does have a good pairing, but I'm still going to stick with my 7s.
Stick with the 7s.
Yeah.
Karen, how about you?
So for the whiskey, I think I am going to give it a 7. I'm not just trying to copycat. I think the novelty of it, which I know isn't a reason that everyone would buy it, but for me, I think the novelty of it, I like having unique things, whether or not they're expensive. I just like having something that's unique and trying, different things, whether it's local or not. So I think just the novelty of Slipknot having a whiskey and being able to try it is a big deal, especially after seeing firsthand how many people apparently can't get it. I think that to me is just like, that just brings it up.
More reason to get it.
Yeah, exactly. For me anyways. I think the price point definitely helps with that. Again, if this was $80, I was gonna be like, no, like there was no way I was gonna buy. No way. But I think it's pretty affordable for the most part, especially for Slipknot fans, like you were saying. And I think the flavor, it is a little bit new, but it's it's definitely drinkable. Again, I would be really interested to make some other cocktails. Again, I didn't try the ones, but I got to see the recipes for those. I'd be really interested in playing around with some cool stuff with this and seeing what I can do with it. So yeah, definitely a 7 for that. The cigar, I think initially I was thinking it was going to be like a 5. After retrohaling, I would bring it up to an 8. This is something I would definitely, it made that big of a difference. I would definitely smoke it in the shop when I like sit down and write and do my homework. Honestly, like labels are a big deal for me too, whether it's classy, minimal or what, but the detail on this label is absolutely beautiful. When I was first getting into cigars, I would go in and I'd be like, what looks cool? I don't know what has a big, but it's like, what looks cool that has a big flavor. Yeah. But it's like, now that I know a little bit more, that's not what I'm going off of, but it's definitely very eye catching, like you said. And if it comes with a bag that has that Jester on it, I'm probably going to buy it at some point. I think it's great.
Sadly, it's a 5-pack that's paper that is, you have to
right. And it doesn't have a
so
box,
you'd have to
but,
somehow,
but just cut around the paper and have the cigar. But it's definitely something that I will smoke again. So together, I'll just round up and I'll just go with an 8 for together for the pairing. I think they do balance each other out very well. Again, because I know I said at the beginning that because I sipped the whiskey first, I think that kind of diluted the cigar. But now that I've retrohaled the cigar and I have more of that flavor and then still drinking the whiskey, I think they go very, very well together, especially for the price points. I think it's something that is, they're both unique in their own way. And I think it was a good choice.
Yeah, not knowing what the whiskey tasted like. You haven't had the cigar. I agree.
Yeah, for sure.
Nate, how about you? I want to hear this. Oh, boy. Definitely don't need your 10 scorecards. Here we go.
On the whiskey, first, thank you for bringing it. Thank you for ordering it and bringing it.
Nice.
I'm going to give the whiskey a 6. It just has that young finish that I'm not a huge fan of. It's good on the nose, but just for me, it just comes across a little too light. There's not enough depth of flavor for what I typically like to drink. Not oily enough. Doesn't really coat the palate. I'm glad we drank the whiskey before getting into the cigar.
Yeah.
Because we had a sip right before we went live, and I'm glad we did that. So that way there was no battling over the palate between the two. But it's as much as I am a fan of Slipknot, it's probably not enough for me to actually go out and spend $40 on this bottle.
Would you have done it going in blind, like seeing this on there or hearing that Slipknot had a whiskey? Would you have bought it for $40?
No.
Wow. Big fan.
I like their music.
You like whiskey, and you
I like whiskey.
Slipknot.
I like their music.
Just trying to get to all those people sitting around a table trying to figure out marketing for a whiskey. So he's a huge fan of the band. He's a huge Slipknot fan. He loves whiskey. He's guaranteed to buy it for $40. No. Hard pass.
If it was maybe on the shelves in Ohio,
right,
I might then pull the trigger on buying a bottle. But having to actually order it, I wouldn't go through that just to order it and try it.
Okay.
On the cigar, I'm a 7 on the cigar. It's good. Especially for the $12, $13 price point, I just wish there was a little bit more to it. I do agree, and we talked about it earlier. I do like the retrohale on the cigar more than just drawing on it. It's got more flavor through the nose than it does on the palate. As far as the pairing, I do give the pairing an 8. I actually think they go pretty well together.
Wow.
Smoking this, if I smoke the cigar and then drink the whiskey, it actually takes a little bit of that young bite on the finish out. It actually is a little bit more well-rounded. When I drink the whiskey and then go to the cigar, it does add a little bit of spice to the palate, but it's not overwhelming. So it actually enhances the flavor of the cigar. So I think they actually do go well together. Even though as light as the whiskey is compared to the cigar, I think they actually go well together.
Steve.
Thank you. This whiskey has, like a lot of them do, but smoking the cigar and everything else. So now, initially, I already made my comments earlier in the show, is that it does have that very, like you say, young. I don't think it's the youngness of it. It's more just, it's not as well balanced all the way to the very end of the finish, which sometimes with a whiskey, it's interesting because depending on what you're doing that night, what you're, how you're drinking, if you're sitting around talking or whatever around a campfire, you know what I mean, and you have a bottle of it like we have here, and it's dwindling quickly, that means you're kind of going back to it, you're talking and everything. Maybe the first one's not, like, first hit on the palate isn't as refreshing or enjoyable, but as you get into it a little bit more, some of that finish does go away. And I don't know if it's because of the cigar or because of having a couple of more sips. Now I've had a couple of glasses of it, but that finish has gone away. So for me, again, I'm actually going to bring in not only the price, so Sean Anderson, go ahead and drink, but I'm going to bring in the price and also the novelty behind it. The fact that it is not only a Slipknot, but this is an Iowa whiskey. This is the first Iowa whiskey that I think that I've had. And I would like to think that this is all Iowa grains. I'd like to think that it's similar to the boys at Starlight, that it's all their own stuff that they're farming, or to them, they said that they brought in some of the other farmers to, help out with some of the projects, and they support that town. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know. I mean, it says it's distilled there, so hopefully it's not sourced, just because I want to believe that it's something that they're doing unique, and they have other products. I'll give all that combined, I'll give it an 8. That's not, again, this is not necessarily one that I'd always go back to and buy. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm out of, number 9 whiskey. I'm out of this one. I'm out of, the Slipknot whiskey. I got to make sure I get another bottle or two. It's not something I'm always going to stock, but I give it an 8 just based on the overall experience with this. It's been enjoyable. And with the cigar, I would give the cigar also an 8. I appreciate kind of my comments earlier, as I think what AJ Fernandez may be doing with some of these projects is trying to put out some unique stuff. That retrohale, for those that haven't had the cigar, if you do retrohale, I would definitely try the cigar and experience it, because it is a very unique cigar. Again, just like the whiskey, it has a unique flavor to it. It's not something that I've had before, and that's kind of a good thing for me. Sometimes, as Nate was saying, it's not really his cup of tea, which is fine. This cigar, again, same thing. For me, I enjoy it. It's unique. The retrohale is very unique. Avi was asking earlier, because he compares to the BS Silver that, one of our sponsors, that has if you don't retrohale that silver, it still has a little pepper. When you retrohale it, it's a pepper blast. And I mean, Bobby says he retrohales that every time. That's one that is part of the smoking experience, is to retrohale a BS Silver. That's, for me, that's how this cigar stands out for me, because it is I have to be in the mood for it, but I have enjoyed this cigar. I would say I enjoy the Toro size a bit more. It's not as in your face as this one for whatever reason, which I don't know. The ring gauge usually affects that, but maybe it's the longer. I don't know. It does smoke a little bit different. So 8. Pairing, I'm going to stick with an 8. So it's kind of 8s across the board for me. A little bit higher than Sean. I think that as I've had a few glasses or a couple glasses, I've smoked through the cigar. By the end of this hour here, we're at an hour here, I've really kind of enjoyed going back and forth between the two of them. And you say it's a lighter whiskey, 90 proof's not super light, but also we're not talking about a real like heavy, like, or spicy barrel aged, or, a barrel proof rather. This is something that it still stands up to this really stout retrohale of a cigar, and vice versa. Every time I retrohale, I still get that same experience. So I think they I don't know if they pair well together as a complement, but they actually stand up next to each other, which is a bit of a surprise because it's 90 proof.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm contradicting myself a little bit there, but I think that's kind of how I look at it.
Would you have liked this whiskey a little bit more if there was, say, more corn and less rye in the end product?
I don't know. I think that if I was going to do this again, For the cigar, I would pick a different whiskey. I would like to try a little bit higher proof. Might even, I don't know if the reserve that we say that's a higher proof.
99.
I would probably say, hey, price point out of it at that point. Let's try that one with the cigar. And if we're doing this whiskey again, probably go with more of a medium bodied cigar that we've featured on there, or like the BS Gold, or we've done like the Espinosa Habano. I mean, it might actually go even better with this AJ product, the up in Nicaragua through Altadis. I think that might actually go a little bit better because that retrohale isn't quite as a big of a punch in your nose when you're retrohaling. It's a little bit more of a balanced smoking experience. So I think that might actually pair a little bit better. Mash bill it's tough for me because we've had, this is 187 episodes. We've had plenty of whiskeys that you look at the mash bill, you look at the proof, and it's not anything what I expected. It's not even close. So it's tough to really talk about the ingredients from the grains going into the bottle. There's a lot more I think that goes into it as far as the mash bill. You know what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's a tough one. That being said, I want to thank, we didn't mention in the beginning, patreon.com/bourbon and BS podcast. Guys, that's a way for you guys to contribute to the show. We appreciate everyone. We've got some patrons in the garage, and I appreciate all you guys. Really helps us out. We're in a standstill with the t-shirts, unfortunately. And I actually checked with our friends at Bourbon and Blondes. They're having the same issues. I think that company, buyjack.com, the guy who's doing it all, small company still, they have a good operation. So I think the products that they have are able to be churned out by the staff. But as far as doing the steps that we're at, he was out of the country for a week and stuff like that. So he's the designer of it. So we kind of just bad timing on that. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll get that up and going. I'm really excited about that because then we'll have some really good perks for patrons, as well as I'll be sending out t-shirts a lot easier and not having to have a surplus. So stay tuned for that. You guys have been amazing. Talking with Josh Bentley from our sponsor, Altadis USA as well. Part of that, he's excited because they've got some really cool swag things that will be raffling off. He's going to contribute more to the show as well. So that's a great way to be a part of that with you raffles. Right now, there's about 20-some people. Hopefully that number will grow, and they'll have a lot of prizes for you guys as well. Tinder Box at Easton, thanks for this. AJ Fernandez, Viva la Vida, Jester. You guys heard it. If you guys are just tuning in now live, go back a little bit, scrub back, and you'll hear what we're talking about as far as our ratings on that. And then BS Cigar Company. We talked about the BS Silver because we have fans that are big BS Cigar Company fans. And so, yeah, the gold and silver are available in all three sizes of both. We're excited about that. We're still working on this. I say it now. It's not coming out next week. Hopefully next year we'll have a third blend with the BS Cigar Company, which we're excited about working on. So stay tuned for that. That's all been slowed down by all the stuff, the trickling of the 2020 pandemic and everything else. Our industry is much like every other's. Everything is slowed down. I read an article today that there was, as of Monday, just in LA and Long Beach ports, where before all this, there might be one boat, container boat, out in the water waiting. On Monday, there was over 65.
Jeez.
So, I mean, that may not seem like a lot, like only 65 boats, 65 times as many. Like, that's the thing. Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. So it's a lot of stuff just sitting in the water out there waiting to come in. And so not as much on that side of the country, but we're talking down like in the Florida area. We're dealing with the same stuff in our industry. So be patient on all that stuff. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Happy Whiskey Thursday. And guys, stay tuned. We're going to have a quick intermission here. If you're listening on the audio, click to part 2. If you guys are listening, now's a great time to take a bathroom break, share it, like it, comment, everything else. You guys are amazing. Karen, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Nate, cheers.
Cheers.
You guys in the audience, cheers.
Sean Anderson said if we can get him a hat and lighter, which I know we have some of those.
He's got a lighter waiting, so I got a package to put together for him. So
He was going to donate the whiskey stones to a raffle if we can get him a hat and lighter.
oh man, now we're negotiating on prizes. Yeah, I think we can do it.
Well, we have some hats behind you.
We got some hats behind us, and we have got a lot of BS hats in the garage too.
Oh,
Didn't know that. So this is the break. Hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks for being here.
no.
What's unbelievable?
Slipknot concert, they're unreal.
Oh, so good. So good. I would go to another show. 100%.
Who's heard my Mudvayne story? Nate, you've heard it, right? No?
I don't know if I've heard the story.
Oh man. I did too once.
That wasn't the one you broke up a fight, was it?
No, I was involved in what could be deemed as a fight. It was a quick one. I went there with two buddies that I worked with in my previous life. It's a quick intermission story here for the bonus feature here. So we went down there. I'd never heard of Mudvayne, never heard any of their songs. I was like, all right, I'll go. That's fine. Whatever. They're pressuring me and they're going. I was like, all right, fine. So I finished the schedule. This was at the moving company, you know, finished the schedule. So we go down there. It's about what I expected, right? It's indoors at Promo West, whatever it's called. Express Live now here in Columbus, Ohio. And I was getting into it a little bit. And one of the guys I was with disappears at one point. It's just, I don't know, concerts, people get weird, right? I mean, people just get fucking weird at concerts. And so my one friend is behind me and has enough alcohol in him or whatever. And he's big into heavy metal as well. You'd never know it looking at him, right? And he's really into it. And I look back at him and he's just dead staring at these guys in front of us. I'm like, dude, are you all right? I don't even think he does drugs. I just think he was like just amped up. They're scheming. I was like, what are you talking about? They're scheming. He's like, oh, those guys right there. I'm like, yeah, I see the guys. They haven't looked back here in the last like 30 minutes. Like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, they're up to something. I'm like, they're not. That's not the fight. My other buddy goes and he's like, I'm going to go down the mosh pit. I'm like, okay, man, good luck. And he was like a collegiate wrestler and everything like that. So I'm like, this has got to end well. He comes back without his shirt and he's like, I ruled that mosh pit. I'm like, what does that mean? And he's like, I was doing swim moves. I was like throwing people on the ground. I was like, I don't think that's how you do it. And I've never done it. But like, you're just like destroying people. And this is just like an outlet for you, which is, I think, part of the reason you go in the mosh pit. So anyways, later he gets lost after the concert, which is another story. He was like, we called him. I said, dude, where'd you go? You're not at the car. And he's like, just laying down right now. I'm like, no, where are you laying down? And not everyone's from Columbus, but it's down in the Arena District. And he's like, I see an arch. I'm like, arch? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know where he's at.
No.
There's like that part of like, what was it, the train system,
Yep.
whatever down there.
Yeah.
And I was like, first of all, get up because you're going to get picked up down here. Like, this is like, I was like, do you have your shirt on? He's like, I have my shirt with me. I was like, well, put that back on. So anyways, we found him. The other part of the story was we're standing there and I'm kind of getting into it, whatever, right? We're not in the mosh pit. We're kind of midway. And again, this is not the first. That was the first time it happened. Sounds really bad. But anyways, I'm standing there kind of getting into it. And this girl is just kind of walking by the three of us in the crowd. And it's like this young girl. I don't know how old she was, but she was not being supervised. She stands in front of me, looks at me, like, so I'm looking at the stage and she just stops, turns, looks at me in the face, right? And I'm like, I'm looking, it's loud, hard rock music. I can't like talk to her, you know what I mean? She's like, yeah, I was just like, hey, I'm like yelling in her face, you know, like this, hey. And she just like looks at me and I'm like, oh, okay. And so I just look back up at the band. Next thing I know, she jumps up on me, puts her hands around my neck, and she's in this like little leather mini skirt and fishnets, and her legs are around my waist, and I'm like this, so I kind of hold her up. I'm like,
wow.
And at this point, I'm like looking like at my buddies, and they're already kind of laughing. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? So I'm a gentleman, so I kind of go along with the music for a moment, right? And I'm like, okay, you're done here. And so I kind of like, okay, like. I'm like, you know, enough. And I'm like trying to like get this in her legs. And I'm like, okay. And pry on her arm. And then she stands there still in front of me. I'm like yelling at her, are you okay? And she starts kind of like wavering. And I'm like, oh God. And I'm just like standing there. I'm like, oh Jesus. She's going to hit a puke on me. She's going to fall. This is where we all think it's going, right?
She's going to fall and blame it on you.
Right. That's not what happened.
Okay.
So she's wavering, looking at me, just kind of like more or less cross-eyed, passing out or whatever at the same time. I'm like, Jesus, this girl's going to go down. I'm like, God damn. No, she just kind of like, she's like doing this. And the next thing I know, I kind of look up, I look back down, and she just goes, boom. Fucking right in the chin. Just cold cocked me out of nowhere. And I just, so my head snaps back. Like it it's just all right. I wasn't ready for it. Anyways, my head snaps back, and I look back down, and she just looks me straight in the eye, doesn't say anything, and just says, and just walks away. She clearly doesn't deal with rejection well, is what I figured out. So I look back, and before I'm like,
Should've hit her
did
back.
you guys see that? To my buddies, and they are just losing their shit. They're just like, yeah, we saw it. What'd you say to her? I was like, she couldn't hear me anyways. I'm yelling, of course, in their ear. She couldn't hear me anyways. Yeah. So she walked out of my life forever. Never seen her since. Shouldn't.
She's probably drinking that dirty vodka.
Who knows? Who knows? So that was my Mudvayne story.
Cool story, bro.
Yep. That's it.
No,
It was worth it, right?
Oh gosh, that. No, I had not heard. You had not told that story.
Well,
before,
now you've
Steve.
heard it. Now they've all heard it.
Annie.
Wow,
It was
that's.
Sean says, sure, it wasn't the sunglasses lady in your walks. Maybe it was. Maybe that's why she doesn't like the cigar smoke. I don't know. You guys ready to do part 2? Need a break? Nugget break. Absolutely.
Can't take you anywhere.
Spilling everywhere. Don't blame Shannon.
Go ahead and do that.
Do we want to raffle off Sean's whiskey stones?
Yeah, sure.
Karen will get to pick the
website.
number.
Yeah. Give us just a moment. We're going to raffle this off here. Pulling up the list here. All right, Karen, pick a number between 1 and 19.
Between 1 and 19.
Yeah, you can pick 1 or 19 or anywhere in between.
8.
Thought you were going to pick number 9, but you picked 8.
I don't do patterns well.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. David Gordon, which I think I've got another one for him. All right, David Gordon, you got what was it? Whiskey Stones.
Yep.
Coming to you as well.
Yeah, I think
Bathroom.
he's also got a lighter and cutter.
Yeah, you know.
Are you still looking for somebody to roll cigars?
Possibly. Yeah, just
He knows a place downtown that does it.
Don Ray. Yeah. Do they do parties?
It looks that's good.
Okay, I'll check them
I
out.
mean, they've got like,
Steve.
I mean,
So Dave Gordon's also got that Warhawk lighter and the Romeo cutter.
Fantastic.
they should.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk. Dave Gordon's listening tonight. You got something coming. Sorry, I've been delayed on that. It's been weird. But yeah, got some.
Oh, he's watching.
He is watching.
Yay.
Who's got the best steak?
All right, let's get rolling into part 2 here before we go too far off here. Let me know when you two are ready at least.
Never.
Did you see the Karen? Could you see them perform when you were?
Many of you guys been so-
Yeah, so we were Heather, do you know any of the layout of like where it is? Okay, so if you are
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know if it was the front or the back of the prison, but you know
I
where
agree.
there's that big back courtyard behind. Yeah. So that's where like all the cement is. I'm pretty sure that's like their yard. That's where we were lined up, was right against the side of the building. Then they had the stage right there. So like if you were in the grass area, you were facing the stage. And then if you were to turn directly towards the penitentiary, that's where our tent was. So they had a bar tent right next to the stage. So they couldn't see any of it, but I really liked our location because you could see from like a beautiful side angle, like the entire performance, and it was great. But I couldn't see any of the other stages, which kind of sucked. But I mean, I didn't really know any of the other bands that were playing on the other stages, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But yeah, I mean, they set it up perfectly. Yeah, it was great. It was really great.
I've been to that.
I probably
Oh,
would
okay,
have.
yeah.
I probably would have enjoyed that concert because The best concert I've ever been to was Rammstein,
Oh yeah, it's cool. It's a
Palace
cool
of Auburn Hills. Saw them in concert. Our seats got upgraded, so like
Okay,
where the
nice.
court would be, the court was just open, no chairs or anything, just people
Yeah.
standing.
Did you get
And
to
then
try
we
it?
were the first
Did you get
row
to
of
try it?
seats
Okay.
directly across from the stage, so there was no one sitting in front of us.
Yeah, I could drink it all day. Yeah.
Yeah, Slipknot, Rob Zombie, like they're getting up there to where, like they're almost getting to the point where they're going to be playing festivals, which is like what this was. Because I remember years ago, the Obet's Zucchini Fest. I saw Blue Oyster Cult.
Right.
Yes, that was awesome. There's a bunch of people around me that have no idea who Blue Oyster Cult
Sweet.
is, and
That's
then
what I
they
like to hear.
hear
Good. I'm
Don't
glad
Fear
you
the
got to try
Reaper,
some.
and
Yeah,
they're like,
I
more
think it's pretty-
cowbell.
Can I have some more?
No.
I'll get something else.
Yeah, you
I-
can have some.
Sunday, I was wearing my More Cowbell T-shirt, and I was at a different cigar shop,
Yeah.
and one of the
That's
older
the
gentlemen there
15.
goes,
Damn.
"What does More Cowbell mean?" So someone played him the video.
Yeah.
He was like, "Here you go.
You could
Here's
have
what this is."
I will.
Oh, yeah.
Does Nick have some of this?
Oh damn! If
We
I'd have known
gotta-
that,
we gotta
if
talk
I'd
to
if
Nick
I'd have
and see
known
what
that
he's
was
got
open to
besides-
the,
We can do scotch. All
if
right,
I'd
let's
have known
figure
that
it
was
out.
open to the panel, Tim, I'd have not poured this.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to try that for years.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Bobby donated a couple bottles up there.
Well, and then
Yeah,
thank you. It's amazing.
It's crooked.
You're always a fun guest.
cut your own damn cigar.
I don't cut. I punch.
It's still crooked. It's dark. I'm trying. I'm not doing it again. Just smoke it with your head tilted.
How about you just give me yours and I'll cut it?
Oh my gosh! Oh, okay. You could have just punched it yourself.
I was going to. You're right. And I'm going to use my actual puncher for this one, so it doesn't get.
We gotta get back on the air here.
You can.
All right.
I'm just going to be punching a cigar.
Punch, punch, punch. Is there food in this bag underneath my chair?
No, there's just a cup. Oh, there is a bag. No, there's no food in there. There it is.
And the internet connection went down. All right, cool. Perfect. Yeah. I've never had the 15 actually.
All right, looks like we're good now.
Yeah, it's back.
You don't have to wait for it.
Oh, we're definitely waiting on you.
Tony's freaking out.
I know he is.
does that
I know
every
he
week.
is. It's all the noise, going in and out of the house.
I would have took him for a walk, but he doesn't know. I walk all the dogs. If the shop people bring them, I take them back to the
It's just too much out here. We've tried it with him out here, and then it's like I can't
Save your
concentrate.
bands for me, please.
I
already
can't
took yours,
let him
but
off leash with the
Save as
doors
many as you can
open.
at the shop for me, please.
Like,
No,
if
I'm
people
covering,
don't mind the
shop
smoke,
with all my bands, and then I'm gonna.
doesn't matter.
Um,
And if we
So there's
close the
another cigar
garage,
shop
like
in
if
town. They got
anyone's
some
okay
swag
with
for
like
an
the
event they're gonna be
smokiness
doing
of it, I'll let him
for
out and he'll wander around after the
Altadis,
podcast.
Romeo, Monte Cristo, and one of the
all-
prizes.
Well,
It's kind of like a piggy bank, but you're supposed to put bands in it.
That's right.
cheers, Dustin. All right, you guys ready?
Hey, gents, will you save your bands for me? Thank you.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 187, part 2. We just wrapped up not only the intermission where we gave away a prize for our patrons, thanks to Sean Anderson that was forwarding his gifts to someone else, which we appreciate the support, and also that's very nice of you. We also did part 1, which was going to be on the small batch, the number 9 Iowa whiskey, Slipknot Iowa whiskey. And we reviewed that, talked about that whole story and everything else. Karen Zajac is here, and also Nate Hale. I feel like I go overboard with the last name because I messed it up.
I'm
the
proud
first
of you.
time. Okay. Anyways, but yeah, so she brought that whiskey. We reviewed it on part 1, as well as the Viva La Vida Jester size from AJ Fernandez on the first part. So if you guys have not listened to part 1 yet and you're interested in our thoughts on that, and also that we have a great studio audience here. We call this a studio. It's a garage, but it's a studio for us. But yeah, so thank you guys for the support and being here, guys. We have some people in from Philadelphia. That's the farthest. I was going to say, and that's it. And from the neighborhood, Reynoldsburg, all over the 2 states. But I want to thank, again, patreon.com/bourbon and BS podcast. Also, Tinder Box at Easton for that Viva La Vida. Altadis USA, Josh Bentley for all the hard work, getting another successful year of sponsorship. We've got the H. Upman Nicaragua by AJ Fernandez as well for part 2. So thank you, Altadis, for that. And then BS Cigar Company, the gold and silver are available at Tinder Box at Easton, as well as they can ship you anything you need, no matter where you're at in the United States. Canada turned out to be a problem. I tried to ship to Canada again, and yeah, no one ships cigars to Canada, tobacco, unless you're a manufacturer. It's garbage. It's garbage. So if you guys are out there listening, you know a way for us to send cigars to Canada.
You just drive.
I'm not going to drive.
That's an expensive delivery fee.
They pay
And right
enough.
now you can only do, I'll talk to you, Bobby. You can get them over the border. They got mules. All right, never mind. I feel like I've said too much. I've said too much. I didn't say your last name, did I, Bobby Hirschman? Shit, I said it again. I said it again. That's my fault. Bobby Hirschman. Thanks for coming. Jesus. All right, tonight we're going to talk about education. That's the topic. I don't know where it's going to go. Karen was the one that did suggest it. She kind of denies it now, I feel like.
No,
But
I
you
just-
did actually say that we should talk about education. I feel like you are currently enrolled
Yes.
in nursing school.
Yes.
And
Oh,
yeah.
thanks. Thanks, guys.
So I think you were just frustrated with starting that back up and said, let's talk
No.
about education. That's how I heard it. She's in the shop. She was doing homework and she's just like, yeah, we should talk about education. I was like, done. A few weeks later, why are we talking about education?
I honestly, I don't know. I don't know why that stuck as the topic. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know. I guess with like everything after COVID and how everything's gotten pushed to, so I started out nursing school completely online, and we didn't have any in-person clinicals. We had a lab which we could go to every other week, and I'm in nursing school and I'm not hating on any nurses. I'm just saying that I wouldn't want me as a nurse in like 5 years. Like, I'm not saying that that's
because
not
of
going
the way
to,
you're being educated.
because of
not
the way that
for
I'm
other
being
reasons.
educated. Yeah. And it's in, we're in the middle, not in the middle of a pandemic, but it's one of those things where I don't know if we're in
We're
the
still
middle
in it.
still. Okay. Well, I don't know. Here we are. It's fine. But I'm not trying to get political. What I'm saying is the education that I've received is, to me, it's surprising because I'm in an associates of nursing program where you get your RN, and then most times, and at least in the state of Ohio, you can get hired on as an RN. Most hospitals will pay for you to get your BSN you just have 5 years to get it pretty much, and then they'll pay for it. And it's usually always the BSN part is an all online program. So what I've done as some research looking into other nursing programs is there are nursing programs that are entirely online, and then you fulfill the clinical requirement later. I don't know how all that works. I'm not in one of those programs.
Mhm.
But what I noticed from a program that they do offer a blended track where you can do like half online, half in person, which is, the labs and clinicals, obviously, is I was really surprised with how disorganized the program was. And I'm not trying to shit on Columbus State. I'm not trying to. My whole point was, if you have like, the technology is there apparently where you can go and get a nursing degree entirely online. I'm not dogging on that at all. I'm saying we have that technology and we had it for years before the pandemic. And there was so much of a problem getting Columbus State, and I'm sure other schools, up to par with where the students can learn properly online. I was just very shocked for how big Columbus State is and how big Ohio State is, because they work very closely together, of how much an issue it was to get online lecture content. And if you have a blended track, which is all online, like the classroom portion is all online, you would think that they would have lectures ready to go.
Right.
And they don't. And with how disorganized it was and how much we were learning in labs, and I understand the whole like, okay, well, you can't be in lab and you have to do like, you know, you're not working with patients, you're working with mannequins, which is very different. But I mean, the technology that we have is great, but it makes me think, you know, why were we not utilizing other types of education that were already in place in a complete online standpoint? You know, like if we already had that ability to, if I had the ability to get a nursing degree online and Columbus State is struggling with it, why did I decide to stay with Columbus State? Is it because of price point? Is it because, you know, it's going to be a 2-year program versus like a 3-year program, like how they're going to do clinicals? Because I feel like now I'm slacking compared to people that are, you know, just graduated. And even though they had more clinical experience than I did, and I know some people though, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place. I know
I'm trying
some
to keep my
people,
thoughts.
I know it's all
You got a
over.
comment
There's a
for
lot
a
that's
comment
coming
to
out
go.
right now. It's just word vomit. It's
fine.
just coming
It's
out
fine.
as it comes.
Someone take notes.
You can go back and re-listen to it. I guess what I'm trying to get at is it surprised me that they struggled so much with getting an online program up and running for the nurses when they already have one that's partially all online. And then to me, it's confusing to me because we have this technology with, you know, virtual reality. So why are they not implementing? And I know it's very expensive. I do know that. I'm sorry, I'm reading that question.
Yeah. So Dave Gordon, who won the prize, my
Yeah.
daughter is in nursing school, master's program, nurse practitioner at this point, while working full time in the emergency room.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's tough. That's really tough, but that's awesome. And see, that's cool stuff. But I've talked to nurses, and my mom's a nurse, and I know a lot of my a lot of the students in my classrooms, like they have a bunch of family that are nurses or in the nursing or in the medical field regardless. And a lot of people say, you know, oh, I didn't do this until I was actually on the floor. I didn't do this in clinical until I was actually on the floor. And you learn the most when you're on the floor and not through clinical. I'm just very curious to see what happens with my whole, like these next couple years from this nursing program. I'm very curious to see what happens. I'm not shitting on my school because they came a really long way. They've done great from my first semester to where I am now. They've completely changed it. They finally got it under control from what I can tell. But you know, why aren't they trying to do something where it's virtual reality? You know, they're charging us already, no offense, out the ass for textbooks. I get that.
Offend anyone here?
It's all online. Like all of your textbooks are online. And I'm very much an in-person learner. I like to go to class with no distractions. I sit down, I write all my handwritten notes. I like that. So it was really tough for me to transition to all online because that's not how I learned. And I mean, I'm not fresh out of high school. I'm almost 28. So me also being at this age, I've been to school for years. I was at Ohio State studying many different things. And then now coming to this environment where it's supposed to be something that's very hands-on and it's not. So I'm very curious to see what happens in the future and how this is going to direct not just nursing, but a lot of the trades as well. I mean, you think about, you know, electricians or auto mechanics, if they had a virtual reality system where, you know, virtual reality is crazy. I actually freaked out the first time I put a headset on and I couldn't handle it because I was like, this is too much. Like
Just
it was
for school or something else?
No, just for fun.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it was crazy to me.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you get used to it and now it's just another type of video game. But to be able to go into a virtual reality setting and, you know, electrician. Okay, so you're looking at this and you're looking at all these different wires. Guess what? You don't get electrocuted. Maybe you would get like a buzz like you would get on like a DualShock controller.
I think you should get a full shock.
Yeah, but I'm saying like, you know, that would be something where it's like, okay, that's not what you're supposed to do. You could still learn trades that way.
Like hook them up to an operation game.
Right. That's pretty much what I'm saying. But it's not even just trades. But I mean, think about EODs in the military.
Mhm.
You know, I don't know anything about what the military technology has, but if they had this capability, okay, you need to diffuse this in 2 seconds. Okay, here you go. Here's your thing. Do it. You need to, you know, navigate through it like it's a game, but it's not.
Let me pause you there for a second. So one of the things that stood out early in that that was they had the technology to do this type of learning
Correct.
before
I'm not saying the
called the
virtual
pandemic.
reality. I'm saying they had the technology to do
to do what
online.
they're doing now.
Correct.
Right. And you said, or you asked, like, why weren't they doing it then?
No, I'm saying why weren't they implementing that technology that they already had to the other students that weren't in the online programs?
Right. But now everyone was forced to do that.
Correct.
Right. So why do you think they didn't do that
I don't know.
before?
I really don't know. And that's my question is maybe the people were just so like shocked about everything that was going on that it was like, okay, how do we do this? Because, I understand the teachers are all used to, teaching in an in-person environment where they worried about the teaching jobs and like having like
Part
their
of it.
employees. I don't know the backstory about all of that.
There's a part of it, like with that, the higher education. And I've got friends that are, people in my
Mhm.
network that are also educators at like high school level and,
Right.
and lower than that as far as that goes, as far as ages. But I mean, that was a whole new learning experience for them to be able to do this. And so part of it is, yes, the machine was already churning, right? As far as the way that they do this, higher education, there's a lot that goes into it that was questioned even during all this time. It's like, well, if normal things are like all the buildings and all this stuff, all the campus and
Mhm.
and everything involved in what runs the business of a university or college or whatever it might be, if the students aren't utilizing that, why are they paying for it? Well, in a short term, it's because when we come back out of it, we still have to maintain the grounds and do all this stuff.
Right.
We're going to do it. So there's that part of it. I think you hit something in that talk there is that people don't talk about in the mass media or when we're doing all this with education. When we're talking about this type of education, this conversation can go to any type of learning, but wherever we want to take this, what I mean? You guys out in the audience, if you guys have comments, you want to do it in the garage as well. You want to take it somewhere else, we can do that. I think there's a part of it that has not been talked about enough because everyone was so in the face about the pandemic. It does all things considered, all that matters is the health, whatever that might mean to you, right? The health of the students, of the people, the when I looked this up originally, when the notes, and this is going back to the Bush administration, as far as when they actually started coming up with some of these scenarios, and as far as we deal with a pandemic, it was originally based on, and you guys may differ on this, but it was all based on the schools of a town, like a fictional town of this much population, and the students are going to the classes, bringing basically everything from the homes to the facility of the school, intermingling and doing this. So if there's a transferable virus, that's where it would happen. We're seeing that now clearly, right? As far as where it is. And again, not talking about what side you are about masks or any of that bullshit. I'm not talking about that. But it's like that was the scenario and the mathematical side of all of this stuff. Back in the Bush administration, that was turned down by the politicians because they couldn't shut it down. This time around, that's what they did. And it was based on the students going back out, right? So anytime you have all of that in a small town scenario, the kids are leaving the homes of the parents, going to this one location, and then basically coming back out into the world. And basically that's the breeding ground. We all know that schools are petri dishes all the time. That's all part of it. The one thing that they don't talk about enough on the side is what you kind of hit on, what the type of learner you are. That's something that I think a lot of people will learn that as they go through either, the basic K through 12, or if you go through higher education and you take certain classes, is that you start learning that there are different types of learners, just like there's different personality types. So that's a way that some of the most successful professors at the schooling that I took, and I went to Miami University in Ohio here. I was a mass comm major, then I switched to sociology. Great for the way I think, but at the same time, not great job training. We can get into that part of the conversation as well if we want to, about education and why you go to school. But that part of it, we did not really address a whole lot as a world when you go to online learning. That was I think it was put way back seat because of the pandemic, and every focus was on the health of the community. And therefore, that was a big sacrifice. People talk about the mental health issues and all that stuff, and I think those are all very valid, of keeping the kids at home during very formidable years, let alone adults staying at home. But with the education side of it, there are multiple ways that people learn. Either they have to be told it, they have to do it, they have to write it down. I mean, that was the type of thing, is that I had classes, lecture halls, and everything like that The only way that I would actually retain anything was to literally look at the slide. And this was back in the day of like overheads. This was also then in college for me. So I went to college from 98 to 2002. So there were a lot of like PowerPoints at that point as well. So you could do that. We had a little bit of online availability as far as if you wanted to go on. We had Ethernet and all that stuff. So you could do it. It's not what it is today. But if you only primarily do one type of teaching, statistically, you are going to lose a lot of the students. And I don't know what the actual statistics are, but I think there's like 4 types of learning. And like I was the type of learner that if I had a slide up on the screen, I'm listening to the person talking and I'm literally looking at that slide and rewriting it. Even if it was available to me as like slides that I could print out and read, I had to go through the motion of writing this down because that's the way, whatever, that gave me just about 5-10% more ability to recall what I'm learning because I actually motor skills and I have that, you have that where you do this. Same thing with nursing. You talked about like electricians and stuff like that. If someone's just reading how to do something, that's not the same. We're in the age of like YouTube videos. So now you're getting into that not virtual reality, but now you're like actually watching someone. You can pause it. You have to like change the brakes in your car and you want to do it yourself. So you can look up like I drive this year of this make of this, car and I need to change the brakes. You do a YouTube search,
You're going to find it.
there's a great possibility that you're going to find one that this works on these cars, yours is included. And it's like, all right, step 1.
I've done that
There's
recently.
just nice people out there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've done that recently.
Yeah. So it doesn't make you a mechanic, but that's that on the job learning that you could, if you wanted to, rebuild a car, you could do it. If you are that type of learner, if you watch someone and they give you the step-by-step how to build a car, but obviously you have the resources. But to that point, it's like, I don't think we talk about that enough is that there are that many different styles of learning.
Oh,
And
no.
I
And
think
it's,
that's a big, I guess, lapse of judgment on what happened with this. And you're talking about they had the ability. So I think that there was the machine working and this is just what we did for a long time. So we had the
Right.
availability for that, but it was tough to make that turn, not only in the teacher side of it, but also in if we're giving it all online, like, why do they need to come to class? And why do we have this building?
right.
That's a problem. But then again, I would like to believe the best out of people that actually care and they are doing it not for the business side is they're like, we can't do that because I have these students that have done really, really well, but I've actually had to be face to face and look at as they're doing it. And I have to show them with my hands on how to do it, especially certain professions like the one you're in.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of facets to it.
What makes me curious is I am now, it's been a year, and I mean we're back in clinicals and labs, and I mean like
Which
with
is in person,
restrictions.
correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in person, but I mean with restrictions. But like being back in that environment has helped me tremendously. But now it's been a year and I'm already acclimated to learning online. And again, like I still write all my notes handwritten, but one of my classmates, she's 19, she's, fresher out of high school than I am. And she takes everything on her iPad. And I mean, this is a technology difference because I'm like, I have my like 9-year-old laptop that I'm typing away and I like look up stuff and it's about to die, but it works. And she's able to literally like, okay, this table's important in my textbook, copy it, drag and drop it into her iPad. And she has the table. And I'm like, that's amazing. I can take a picture of it on my phone, but I'm not going to sit there and stare and like try to zoom in on my phone and send it to my laptop through my email to look at that picture when I have the book online anyways. But it's just the learning differences because she's 19 and I'm about to be 28. Just that age difference and what she's able to do on her iPad is fascinating to me because then it makes me think, okay, so the kids that were in school, in elementary and grade school, whatever, through the pandemic, and they did all the online learning and they did the half in school and half at home when they started bringing things back. How are they going to start acclimating to learning? Are they going to go more for online programs because they liked it better? Or are they going to go more for trade programs because they want to get their hands dirty because they didn't get to? And it makes me curious in that regard because I know a lot of people are like, well, if I would have done a trade program, I like doing the hands-on stuff, but I had to sit there and go through all of the bullshit of getting a degree. Not that, I'm saying a degree is bullshit, but
some of it is.
Yes and no, but it's the premise of what's going to happen with the kids that are already acclimated. I mean, I'm not again, like I still consider myself younger. I'm 28, but it took me a minute to acclimate to
You're
online
younger than
learning.
this crowd right here.
That wasn't my point. That wasn't my
Everyone's out there
point.
like, fuck you. Like,
It
get
wasn't
out
my
of here.
point, but what I'm saying is I
Old
already
lady
feel
over here.
I feel old, man. What I'm saying is I already got acclimated to online learning and I don't prefer it because I know I learn better in person. But when they're talking about like our lectures are live online, so they sit with the professor, they go through the lecture, which is all PowerPoint. You watch it flash up on your laptop, and then you sit there for 2 hours and you take your notes. I'm not waking up at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday to do that. When that lecture is going to be recorded, and I can go back at any point.
Absolutely.
But it's cool because it is recorded. So I want to pause it. I want to take notes. I want to rewind. I can do all that. So it makes me think, okay, well, from a lecture standpoint, I like online learning now. But then it still lacks because it's confusing because I know that it's not the best way for me to learn. But
Yeah.
for right now, I'm like, I'm just being lazy because I'm used to it.
So I think you're talking about I look at a lot of the things, especially in this last 18, 24 months, is that my hope, and I've said it before, is, and this goes with anything in life, but I think with what we're doing, talk about education, I would hope that take the business side out of it, which is really tough to do when whether you're talking about even like elementary schools, like, and there's all these moving parts, or, K through 12, or you talk about higher learning. The business side is a big factor because, again, that's the machine and there is some value to it. But I would agree. I would hope that some of the best practices would come out of it.
Right.
Now, what would change is some of these let's stick with higher learning at this point. Some of the universities and colleges is that you have these massive 400 people lecture halls. What do you use that for other than movie viewing if you don't have to do it, right? So now there's logistics there, but I would agree with that. Is that my recollection, and we're going back now 20 years. It's the fact that I go to a lecture hall and it was like really mundane. It's like I have to be somewhere, say it's 8 a.m., whatever time it is. And all you do is you go in, you find the seat, and you're with 200, 400 people. And there's a person up there that if it's not a very good, engaging professor to the way you learn, and I'm going to keep on that point of your learning style, you might as well just sit in front of a computer because the technology is there.
Exactly.
And to do that would be a new best practice that I think that you could eliminate a lot of lecture halls in a lot of topics and a lot of majors, a lot of subjects that you would say, you don't need to come to this mass gathering to basically do with, because we didn't have the technology, that you have to be here. So I can literally throw up going back on there. And everyone seen the new Suicide Squad?
Yes.
I love that line where the young girl, and it's like literally looks, it's just like, what's that over there? An overhead projector. Do you still use it? No. Why do you still have it? And just moves on. Like, what? I feel like there's a lot of that. I remember the overhead projector, right? And it's like the transparencies. It was amazing when they went from like the dry erase or white or the markers to like printed out Xerox copies onto the overhead projector. And you're like, oh my God, that looks amazing. Like, because they just put this thing on there, they just print it on there. Anyways, there is some best practices that we can take from it, but there's limitations to it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's the confusion there, because not to dive too far down into it, not only do you have the machines of the higher education or the even lower education systems, is the fact that you also have now all these technology, like you have all the Microsofts, you have the Apples and all the stuff. Now they're invested, right? And they have been for many, many decades now, but it's like now they have all that stuff. And it's like, well, what's the best business? Do I do it on the online style? Is it Zoom? Is it what Skype? Is it whatever else you have? Is it the bulletin? Like I had bulletin board back in the day, right? And it was like something we had. I don't know if you guys still have that, but you have these things that are available. And it's like, these are all business contracts in the background that no one talks about, that yes, you can do a lot of this stuff, but when it comes down to it, much like social interaction, I'm of the thought that not only is it that you need to do some things hands-on, whether or not you have virtual reality, because until you are that nurse or you're that surgeon that you can literally use the virtual reality, and now robots are doing the surgery, which I know is a thing now, but it's still super expensive.
Oh yeah.
Because now you're talking about other businesses, R&D and all that involved in it. But you got to get to that point where are there best practices, and this not just with the pandemic, but constantly that evolution of the education, because this might have been the big awakening for education systems, is that, okay, what did we learn? And that's what I'd like to think, and I don't think it's happening as much, is that what did we learn, what worked, what didn't work, what students did we lose during this, and what students did we gain better response to because of that 19-year-old you're talking about?
Right.
Is there something? I remember when I was in college, again, I'd go in there and there was actually like a computer class, right? And it was literally trying to learn not only like HTML and stuff like that back in the day, but it was also like I know at community colleges, there were courses on how to use Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Office. These were courses that weren't always taught in high schools, but they actually were taught at a collegiate level, whether it be associates or, like a community college, or even they had them, I think, at Miami where I was.
Mhm.
So maybe that's a best practice that you come from, is that you say, all right, this is a way to learn or try to learn that, is that instead of writing this stuff down, this is how you do what that other girl in your class did.
Mhm.
And now you have to look at it and you have to learn, like, okay, that makes sense. And now you can apply that.
Right.
So there's a relearning of how to learn, almost, in a sense,
For
as
sure.
redundant as that may be, but that's how it works. If you don't know how to use, again, you go back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if you didn't know how to use a computer, but you were very successful at doing a job, like a sales job, you can write out your work orders. But then I had to train a guy that was 20 years older than me, and it was in the moving and storage, and he'd go out to do estimates, and he would write it down. And we'd give him, like, the we call it cube sheets, right? And so it was like a printed off thing, and you just like one, bedroom, one, this many boxes, all that stuff. He was so efficient and everything on a legal pad where he just wrote it down, and he would run circles around everyone. And then he would spend, because we had a database, he had to put it in to do the scheduling. He'd spend an additional 2 hours a day at least just re-entering that in, and trying to train that individual to just take out, at the time it was a Toshiba tablet laptop, and say, hey, you can do this now, and this will save you in the long run. It was the biggest struggle that was never a success, because it was a relearning process that
Right.
he would not devote it to, because he wanted to be on the job doing it the way he could, and then he'd take the sacrifice in the background, to put more time into it.
Interesting that you, when it comes to, you're talking about education and things like that. It's like the newer generations, as they call them, they want things that are, in a sense, handed to them. Whereas I and Bobby and probably a lot of guys here.
Introduce yourself to everyone.
My name's Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
But
Thanks for sharing.
everybody probably around here learn, like you say, hands-on. If I didn't learn, like, from my father, and I can probably speak for a lot of guys here, their dads, but for me specifically, if I didn't learn how to build motors, my father, since I was a little kid, used to buy me little motors. I had to tear them apart, clean everything, put it back together, and the motor had to run. You know what I mean? And it's like kids today, and I have friends who are mechanics, and they talk about the kids that come through the schools these days, and they're like, it's computerized and everything, and that's all well and good, but they don't know how to. They're using diagnostics on motors and things, but they don't know how to physically fix a motor. They don't know how to use micrometers to measure cylinder walls and things like that. And that's, my father taught me how to do all that kind of stuff. So being used to use my hands to physically put a motor together and make it run and things like that, I think it's really it's an advantage. It has been an advantage for me. And same thing like with nursing and things like that. You can do things on computers, but unless you physically put your hands on somebody and know what something feels like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
What a heart feels like, what a lung feels like, whatever, you really don't know. You really don't
I think
know.
even with nursing, it's like, I know you talked about you practice on mannequins or whatever you call it.
Yeah, I mean, like, they're,
But
don't get me wrong, they're classy mannequins. Like, you
Like, they have a top hat on?
Of
or-
course, they've got a talk. They've got the monocle and everything. They're dressed in a full suit. No, but it's like, I remember one time we were in the simulation lab, which they have 2 mannequins in the simulation lab, or 2 dummies. They have pulses, they have like oxygen sounds. They
Very
go
advanced,
into,
basically,
they're
not
very
just-
advanced, but these mannequins are 40 grand a piece.
Oh.
And it's because, you know, you can put an IV in, and if you miss it, you're going to not mess it up, but you know, it's a simulation of learning, you know, okay, this is actually where, you know, the pulses are, this is where the veins are, the arteries, you know, you can feel the different pulses of, you know, the pedal pulse and the radial pulse. You can feel everything on these mannequins, and they're really high tech. But kind of going off of what you were saying, Scott, was what makes me wonder about like the future generations is kind of like how you're saying they want everything handed to them. And if everything makes this huge technological turn to more online based learning, where like homework's all online now, like you don't turn anything in anymore. I mean, like we have like lab checkoffs, which you have to show like your ability to do a skill, but it makes me wonder for like grade school kids, I wonder if the arts are going to deplete.
They already have. I mean,
They
I'll say that.
have,
Like
but
the,
it's just
the extracurricular stuff. I mean, I remember like this was something that we took advantage, like we took for granted at some point. I think like high school for me, right? And I went to suburban high school, public high school, and it was something like home ec, industrial tech. It was like, you know, like the music programs, even the sport programs. Woodshop was industrial tech for, you know, so you had those types of things as electives that you almost had to take. Like it was like electives you maybe could have chosen home ec versus industrial tech. So that was like, you know, obviously like sewing, cooking, and everything else. And it was the wood shop or whatever you want to call it. Well, yeah. But it was something where like you had all that stuff. Now a lot of it's not in the budget, so now they're gone.
Right. Which just, I mean, you know, if you think about it, like I remember when the levy didn't pass and we didn't have art class anymore, or, you know, you didn't have gym. And then they're like, well, you need to be physical. So we'll take away music instead. And if things kept progressing that way, like obviously kids can still be creative with, you know, graphic design. And, you know, I remember using paint on the computer and that was a bunch of fun. But at what point is it where you don't have art class? You know, I remember loving playing with clay. That was the best part. You know, when you got the pottery section in art class, that was the coolest part.
Ceramics
was
fun.
It was so
cool,
much
like
fun.
The kiln and everything.
Yeah,
like that.
You're like, don't touch the kiln, it'll melt your face off like Terminator. You're like, okay, that's cool. I want to see that.
That's a good teacher right there.
Right?
Oh, wait. It was a good teacher.
Good teaching.
You just wanted to see
I just wanted to, you know,
that one person in your class
melt their face off.
Right.
It's fine.
separate issues. I feel like. Did you have something to?
Yeah, my name's Steve. It's been about 30 seconds since my last drink.
Okay.
And,
Hi, Steve.
So they have a 30-second.
Thank you for sharing, Steve.
Made that joke in front of the wrong audience one time. It wasn't good.
Yeah, it's touchy.
It's the right audience.
So I've worked in distance communications for like 20 years. And in the beginning, nobody wanted to do it because everybody had their preference of the way that they completed their practice. So my background is I worked with lawyers.
So explain the distance thing.
So collaboration tools, what we call Zoom.
Okay.
Zoom right now is the biggest one. That's the big thing that everybody's looking at. A lot of people forget that this stuff used to fail over and over and over again. We have an old saying in the industry, which is basically the older the technology, the more reliable it is. And the funny thing is that this pandemic happened at a really interesting point in time where a lot of these tools have been vetted over time.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who do not trust them because of various reasons. So the funny thing is like I couldn't get people to use these tools before. I was trying to talk them into it and show them ways to use it. Now they have to use it. They have no choice if they want to make X dollars per hour to bill their client. They have to use these tools.
What were the reservations before? Because
they're physical restrictions, so you can't see someone's eye movements as well when you're doing it through Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind that
these are lawyers.
Yeah, well, it happens in every industry.
Yeah.
So it's even happening with teachers right now.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of complaints that they can't teach children as well remotely as they can, and there's a lot of other things going on with that too. I mean, there's a lot of like I have to teach children in the room as well as online, things like that. It's different than higher education,
right?
But really what I think we're seeing is we're seeing that catastrophic moment where things are going to change. I think you're seeing with technology and especially in the field that you're talking about, they're probably going to start shifting towards seeing some more of these things And Steve, you mentioned it before, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that shift.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of requirements from state organizations and things like that. But I think what you're talking about is going to happen. But in the world that I was in, they would always say the wheels of justice move slowly. That was just another way of saying that they don't want to write the check right now.
So do you think this is part of that? So I mentioned earlier that, you know, during the Bush administration, this was something like we talked about this in the mid 2000s, and you had the swine flu, the avian flu, all this stuff, but we didn't have it. Not everyone had an iPhone in their pocket or whatever you want to have, right? Not everyone had a internet connection that could handle a Zoom call. No one had that.
No.
Maybe major corporations had that and they were paying out the ass for it.
You'd have money to have that.
So that may have been, actually looking back, that might have been part of it, is that it would have crippled things a lot more back 15 years ago than it would now. This was something that I bet you was part of that conversation. You know, can we actually do this effectively? And in the US, in a lot of the areas, because even people below the poverty line have an iPhone, have an Android, have some sort of smartphone, right? And it was almost assumed that, well, the majority of people do have this capability, so we could try it this time. You know what I mean? And there was a little blowback there where if you were in college and you were like, say you were scraping by and you were able to like afford college, but you didn't have, I mean, like when I was in college, I didn't own a computer. I used my roommate's computer.
Yeah.
My junior year, I actually like bought a car instead of a computer because I needed to get around. But I had roommates that had a computer, because at the time desktop computers were like fucking more than my car, because I bought my first car for $1,500. And I was like, oh, do I buy a car or a computer?
$3,000 laptops.
Yeah, well, yeah, or like we had, you know, people had like the PCs,
Yeah.
you know, like Gateway was a thing back then, you know, like God,
You buy the 486
Gateway.
processor and you can double it for $3,000.
yeah, exactly.
Double the speed to it.
But it was available now.
Yeah.
So to your point in your career, like this is something that you can lean on. You're like, hey, like we got it.
I've seen laptops go from, like I joked before, from $3,000 to $150.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
It's $150 for a laptop.
Mhm.
So right now, like I'm in my mid 40s. My son has lots of technology that I can't believe he owns. I can't believe it, because when I was a kid, to own the technology that he has, you had to go to COSI.
Yeah.
You had to go to COSI to see this stuff.
Right.
And it was thousands upon thousands of dollars when it exists there, and it was terrible. It looked like the movie Lawnmower Man. Now I'm really dating myself.
that was pretty impressive.
Yeah. So I mean,
Virtuosity, remember that one?
yes. And now you've got my son sits at home in a virtual world. He literally spends about equal time in that world than he does with me. It's eking the other way.
So I want to say, Jody Jacks out there says, you know, fortunately for us that have kids in middle and high school that are dealing with multiple quarantines, most subjects are available online and our kids aren't behind. You're absolutely right, Jody. And I know you do well enough to you know, you bust your ass, because I know Jody and she busts her ass. These are the things that were almost assumed. So if you have 3 kids and you have a job, that was one of the things that was also a problem with the education.
Mhm.
And again, I don't want to just talk about just the last 18 months.
Right.
This is something that was almost assumed, that it's like, well, they have it. It's like, well, if you have 3 kids that are supposed to be learning online at the same time, so I need either like 3 iPads, 3 computers, I need to have the broadband, I need to have all this stuff. And it's like, you just assume that even in a public school system, no matter where you're at in the US, we want to keep it there, across the world, same thing, that you just have the ability to have all this shit, where a lot of families still maybe have 1 computer. So what do you do? It's like, all right, this is old school. You have the most potential. You're on the computer. The other 2, go play outside for a few hours and we'll get you back on. All right. Like that's just, I mean, that's the reality of it. You know what I mean? Like you're talking about, even like you're looking at that other girl in your class that's got an iPad and all this stuff, and you've got what you said, a 9-year-old laptop?
Yeah.
7?
It's almost 9 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. It's showing its age.
I'll
you know?
literally
It's
sit
more or
on a
less
Zoom call and people
desktop,
are,
you have to have it plugged in,
oh,
right?
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
a
literally
desktop
makes
and
this like
laptop.
really pretty, like whirring sound. And I'll like
That's
go,
the fan dying.
I know, but like I took her to Best Buy and they're like, it's still running. I'm like, I know, but like, what's wrong? They're like, oh, we can't fix it. We don't have the parts. And I'm like, great. Okay, cool.
It's like taking a car and the mechanic and be like, nah, you should be good. But don't drive it far. Okay, just don't
Don't
out
go
of
above
state,
don't
you know
go
what I mean?
above 60.
When it starts smoking, that's the problem.
Yeah,
But it's
pull-
like
pull
I'll
off.
be trying to talk and like because in these online lectures you need like participation and whatnot. So we'll be talking and doing like our recitation and communicating with other classmates. And my laptop is so loud that they can't hear me because it makes this loud whirring sound.
You got a
And
V6 in there? Or what is
it's
it?
a V8, thanks.
It's a 4-banger.
It's an HP.
It's using all of its processes.
It's a
Yeah.
diesel. It's a diesel. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little louder, but it's efficient.
It's fine. It's fine. But then I'm just like, it maybe has seen a little bit more smoke than it probably should have at its age, but but it's just, technology right now, like it's not built to last. Like on another note, I have an iPhone 6 and I don't know how it's still functioning. It's almost not functioning. But that thing-
my iPhone 10's dying. I got a new one. coming
Yeah, I
tomorrow.
know. I
So
was
frustrated.
I was literally in the Verizon store yesterday and this girl is like selling this couple on an iPhone, like, what is it, the 13 that's about to come out?
Why you
And
gotta
this
say it
guy,
like that?
well, this guy was like, well, my iPhone 10 is like, it's having this. Well, she's like, yeah, it's like almost 4 years old. Of course, like technology is not
Yeah.
meant to build it. And I'm like, mine is a dinosaur then. Like this thing, it still has the home button, guys. Like everyone's like, wow, your phone's so small. And I'm like, yeah, see, you get it.
This is where you announce your Patreon.
I need one. Guys,
Yeah,
I
I'll
need
talk
one.
to
I
you.
need a new
We'll-
phone.
GoFundMe.
Is that even a thing anymore? GoFundMe?
It is actually. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
well,
No,
I-
and
Go fund my new
obviously,
laptop.
Avi, who was on, I'll say this: Avi, that was on earlier, commenting, he's
Yeah.
going to come by because you want to see these guys. But he's like, I feel like you already have a full garage, which we kind of do.
we have an empty seat.
Yeah, it's too late for him
We do
now.
now.
But no, you talk about Patreon. This is something that you doing this stuff is that this laptop is not a new one. This is a refurb. Whatever my MacBook Air that I had, I was just churning away. I was like 8-9 years old, and we started doing this stuff on it.
Mhm.
It started slowing down. Finally, So Avi was kind enough. I want to give a shout out to him and Avi, please plug your company on the Bourbon and BS community page. But he actually donated this
That's amazing.
computer for the podcast.
And see, then that makes me think, do I buy a new laptop or do I buy a refurbished one? Because the refurbished one in my mind, as I'm like, mine's used and mine's crap. And I'm
Well,
not saying that they're
talk to
not,
Avi.
but it's just one of those. And I mean,
Honestly.
I know
I'll send you
people.
one next week.
No, but guys like Avi, that's the thing. That's the great part about networking is Avi out there. So this was a 2015, but it was like the highest specs or whatever, and it's refurb that he actually wiped out and actually made sure it was all good. And he actually donated. It's churning along just great.
Oh yeah, it's doing great so far.
Yeah.
It's your internet's the problem.
I think no matter how much technology advances, when it comes to education, there are some things that just like you talked about, Steve, that there's different types of learning.
Yes.
There are different subject matters that technology just cannot replace how you learn the same way as hands-on.
Right.
So like when I was in college, like doing English classes, sociology classes, like all that stuff, if it existed back then, we could have done it completely online. English
Did
class,
exist. First of all, it did exist back then.
not at my school.
Oh, I thought you meant like sociology.
The subjects did,
Major
but
with.
you could literally do all the classwork and everything completely online. You didn't have to necessarily be in a class if in those same subjects now. But there were some subjects. So I was a biology major. Chemistry, organic, inorganic, like the labs really don't necessarily teach you all the formulas and how electrons transfer between, like you can learn all that stuff online, but like biology, you're talking about nursing.
Oh yeah.
I can sit there and look at a schematic of an animal in a textbook and be like, okay, this is where this organ is, this is where this organ is. But until you actually cut open one
Mm-hmm.
and actually get your hands and see it there, because it's gonna
You
vary.
got to
a
lift
little-
up the stomach to look at the pancreas. And
exactly. Like, and I think that's also translated into jobs over the last 18 months. Like we have seen some people that, before all this, everyone was working in the office. And now they're like, okay, you don't need to be in the office. Like with what you do, with what your job is, you don't have to be here. Other people, you absolutely have to be here.
Okay.
And it's, education and the workplace have both seen that same thing. Some people need to be there in the office or hands on other people can. Yeah, Shannon can't remotely cut someone's hair.
Oh, he can.
If yeah,
With robots.
if Shannon wanted to spend the
Was that
money
with
on
robots? Here's what I'll say to that, though, is that there is a part of this, and Brandon Karst, who's a good friend of mine, he's been on the podcast, and he actually reminds me of Will Hunting from Good Will Hunting, right? So this is something, this online, availability, not the Zoom stuff and all that stuff, but as far as like the lecture halls and everything else, so like what I was, it was already done. It was in a library.
Yeah,
Like that.
I
There
love
was a
that.
scene
I
in
love that
Good Will
scene.
Hunting about the guy. It was Harvard, is that right? MIT,
Harvard.
Harvard. But it was like that scene in the bar or whatever, where like Matt Damon and that guy with the blonde ponytail or whatever else. It was actually a very powerful scene in a sense to me, because it was funny. First of all, that it's like, yeah, you read all this, and did you read Wood or whatever it was? You know what I mean? And you're just regurgitating Wood or whatever. And it's like, that's something you can learn with a free library membership. But then the rebuttal, which was very much, I think, still true to this day, is that, yeah, but you'll be whatever. What are you gassing up my car as I'm driving to my kids to the ski lodge or whatever? Well, I forget what it was.
You'll be serving my kids McDonald's.
I think McDonald's was the name. I don't think they paid for that. But I think that it was something where it's like there's still a bit of a value there, is that this online learning stuff, especially in the basic part of it, where you're not actually, it's not even the hands-on, that was always available. It was just in book form. It was available, like public libraries. If you're in an area that has it, you just have to seek it out. So it was like, that's how that works. Great neighborhood. It's fine. Oh, good.
Well, but even as much as technology advancements have helped education in some areas, it's not necessarily nationwide. Like there are still a lot of rural schools that
Absolutely.
If the kid needs to write an essay for English class, he has to go to the library, or either the school library or the public library, county library, because the either the family doesn't have a computer, or they're in an area so rural they don't have internet or something like that, so they can't look up stuff. I mean, how many of us
And based on demographics,
how many of us had
a lot of this?
how many of us had to look up books for a research paper using the little cards with the Dewey Decimal System and the pull out drawers?
Yeah, and you had to put like the little
Yeah. Like I'm
Britannica, man.
I remember having to do that even when I was in
RIP
college.
Britannica.
Even when I was in college, having to go to a section and look for certain books, or go to the index cards that had the subject and where that was going to be located in the library, and then go get that book, because I couldn't just look it
I
up
think
on
Google capitalized on that.
But I was still
I think they got it.
But I was still in that generation, even in college, where if you were to do a research paper and you were to look up something online as a source, internet sources did not have the weight as like an actual printed book, whether a textbook, encyclopedia, a journal.
Because you just use the summary. That's what I did. I sourced the source, but then I just used the summary. I got a B in speech class. Believe it or not, I even at that age, I could just bullshit my way through stuff. And it's like, well, you use sources, you hit the number, but you didn't even talk about it because you just used what the library had in the summary. Like the teacher knew this.
At least you got a B.
That was one of my best grades in college, and I graduated.
Hey, B's get degrees, man. So do
Yeah,
C's.
B's do get degrees.
Well, and I saw an article earlier this year, since we're talking about education, and this is more of a I guess a dig at American education in certain areas. But there was a kid earlier this year, he thought he was going to graduate. He was a senior.
Yeah.
He had passed only 3 classes, had a 0.13 GPA. And here's the kicker. Out of 120 students with a 0.13, he was 62nd in his class. That means there were 61 students who had worse than a 0.13.
Yeah.
Like, now granted, he also had a lot of other issues. He had 272 lates or absences.
Yeah, there are other factors.
Yeah, there are other factors
in there to
but
paint the picture.
But no, I think but that happened, and that was in a very large city.
Mhm.
That was not some rural hick town.
No,
That was in-
cities have its bigger problems.
Yeah, we see it more and more with inner city schools, but it's just, it's not just the education system. I think it's also like people within the home, like the value that they put on education.
Goes back to what Scott was saying.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I think that is a big part of it, is that, you brought up the fact that you learned about, from your dad, right? That, this is how you do this. Obviously that's different for everyone as far as what their upbringing is. And I always joke about that from a sociological standpoint, is that, you make a wise choice if you choose good parents, right? I mean, it's that simple, right? It's like, if you pick a middle to upper class set of parents that are very hands-on parents, like, you did really good in the womb that you picked that. It's that absurd. But my point is that there's a lot of that well, again, what I feel like what will transpire through all of like what you're going through in your nursing school, and what the kids are going through in their schooling right now, is that you are, again, just like the learning styles, we have just absolutely just neglected the fact that the home life and what got you into that, right? So we saw that a lot with like the public schools and everything else, is that when you were then just forced to stay at home, well, one of the safe havens of a lot of homes, not only like the really rough childhoods and rough home lives, but even just the parents are always working, is that it was almost like a part of the system, is that, going to school was part of that life, is that you could go to a good, hopefully a public school or a good private school, or you could go to all this stuff. And like, that was part of the upbringing of the child, right? So this is something that we have completely just put on the back burner during all of this, is that now it's, no matter what the age is, you basically just have to rely on that home life to sustain the part that the teachers weren't necessarily relying on.
Right.
But I also knew that.
No.
You gotta get the mic,
You're
Scott.
here, so
Nate number 2. I'm sorry.
No, but I also knew that I wanted to play sports. I love playing sports. And if I didn't have the grades, my parents were like, "You're not going to play sports." Grades came first.
mhm.
You know what I mean? Come home, do your homework, whatever.
You're a student athlete
Well, I mean,
in that order.
well, yeah. I mean, they said, if you want to play this, you want to do this, you got to have the grades. If you don't have the grades, you're not going to do any of that. You're going to get your butt home. You're going to study. And you're going to get your grades first. That's most important.
I had to make that choice on my own when I was in college, because what initially had drawn me to the college that I attended was I'd gotten recruited to play football. And I was on JV my freshman year of football. And then being a science major, I was going to then have like 3 labs a week for the last 3 years of college. And all those labs were 2 to 5 in the afternoon. And that's when football practice was from 3 to 5:30. And so obviously I'd be missing at least 3 practices a week. And so after my freshman year, I had to make a choice. Do I want to keep playing football, or do I want to focus on school? And I was like, well, I'm not on scholarship because it's a D3 school. So if I'm here paying for college and my parents are paying for college, then I need to do college. I can't do football. And so when I was in grade school, I never had that issue because I was always one of the tops of my class, even though I was playing 3 sports a year. I never had to worry about that. But once I got to college, I couldn't do that because not only was I going to school or playing sports, I also had a job on campus when I was in school. So I had to make a choice. I got to cut something. What's the easiest thing to cut that makes the most sense? Cutting football. Why? Because me going to a D3 school, being a 5'9", 180-pound wide receiver, I'm not going pro. So I got to make something that makes the most sense long term.
At least you knew early on.
That's interesting because Bobby's son, he played football, just recently said, Dad, I'm not going to play football anymore because I'm not going to go pro. There's other things I want to do. So why am I putting myself out here, playing these sports? I mean, even though it's fun and everything, but why am I going to do this if I know I'm not going to play ball in college or anything like that. So, priorities. It comes with priorities,
Yeah.
and honestly, that comes with good parenting. I think the basis of it is good parenting. You know what I mean? And children knowing their limitations and not wanting to. It's like not they don't want to please. They want to please themselves. They want to please their parents, but they also know that okay, this is not for me because I know I'm not going to be on TV on Sundays or Saturdays or whatever. But I got to do what I need to do for me and what I want to do. So I think, like I said, it all comes with a good parenting. The basis of it is good parenting.
Well, it's great if it's available. Corey, you want to say something? What's that? That's what I heard. So I heard you're a good parent. Go ahead.
I was going to introduce a question.
Go ahead.
Do you think that in our country we have put too great an emphasis on secondary education, on going to college?
Yes.
College.
Yes, 100%.
Why? How so?
Because from my personal experience, I don't know about you guys, but I grew up very much in a household where both of my parents went to higher education. They both had at least bachelor's degrees. And they were very much, this is what you do. You go to school, then you go to college. And because that's what they did. And that's fine because their parents were the ones that were like, they didn't maybe have the chance to go to college. So it was a big deal that college was more readily available, assuming you had the money for it or student loans, whatever. We'll get to that. But, you go to school, then you have a living. And the whole point back then was you go to school to figure out what you want to do, and then you do it, and then you have your career. Well, I personally, this makes me sound very braggadocious. I have a great skill set, I think. I think I'm a jack of all trades. I do a lot of different things. I mean, I'm writing a book. I'm in nursing school. I've been bartending for 7 years. It's one of those things where I have a lot of different skills under my belt, but I had so much trouble finding a job that would pay me enough to live because I don't have a degree while I'm still going to school. Now I can make okay money if I wanted to work, full time doing a night shift somewhere. But I mean, still it's like $12 an hour, $15 an hour. And I mean, now we're getting into money and how much is the minimum wage and you can't afford to live off of that. But I don't think there's enough, there's not even enough jobs that I know that I could do and that I qualify for with my experience. But because I don't have that piece of paper, they're not going to even give me a look on my applications. And so for me, it's like, I understand that I am in school, but I'm going to school. And yeah, I want to be a nurse and whatever, but I'm going to school for job security because I can get a job at any point. I can go anywhere in the country and I can get a job as a nurse. And I know people that went to college and got a degree, and I'm not bashing you, Steve, at all. But I know kids that, they went and they got a degree in, communications or psychology, and they don't use that at all. I know, but I wasn't going to say that. And
I started a podcast.
Just because they have that degree, they were able to get an entry-level position somewhere that I could have easily have done that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I've been a secretary for how many years, and I've worked in administration for how many years. Well, now a lot of even like secretarial jobs, they require an associate's. I don't know why. I mean, I genuinely don't know why. And there's nothing wrong with that if they want that prestige, but I also don't know very many people that are at least my generation and my age that are like, yeah, I spend this much money on my degree in communication and I want to go work and make $30,000 a year doing this. Like, if you're going to go and spend that money on a degree, I think it should be for something that's going to be able to provide more for you because you have that. Otherwise, you don't need to go to college to learn how to be a secretary. And I'm not saying anything against that because I've learned so much being in administration. I've learned so much doing that.
My mom's been a secretary for over 40 years and she never went to college.
Yeah. And
but because of her 40 years experience, I mean, she makes way more money than I do.
Oh yeah.
So as an employer, though, there is something, and I'm going back to when I went to school and my parents and everything else. Before that, fortunately, both my parents actually graduated from the same university, right? So, and they took different paths, right? My dad was in a different business that was higher paying, and then my mom went into social work, and they both went to the same university. There are those hiring factors. And I think that is part of what's been in this country that's been actually bred into it is if you can, it's about this sense of completion, because the high school diploma was something that was at one point something that would get you into certain jobs. If you went into a college or a university, that this would show that if, especially like with nursing, right? Obviously, like this is the more of like a college level trade school,
Right.
very, very specific, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, you say you didn't want to like dog on me or whatever, but it was like sociology. I took that because I was in a point being a white suburban kid or whatever, is I went to college because it was the next step. Now, when I got there, I went to mass comm because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had friends, and I don't know if it still happens today. It's very scary that what happens today, if you're talking about the higher learning, is that you can basically take out the same level of financial burden as a mortgage to go into school as an undecided major.
Yeah.
That's where we've come. And even back in late 1990s, 1998, I had friends freshman year that were undecided. And that's insane to me now. It's been insane. Like back in that time, I'm like, oh, cool, you'll figure it out, because that's where I was at.
Mhm.
Now it's like, what the fuck are you doing there? Like, that's insane. Like, this is like, do you know what this costs? Because even at that time, I had student loans racking up, and I was like, oh, I'm in astronomy class. Like, cool. Like, this is kind of interesting, but why am I like, even at that time, I was like, why am I taking this course? Like, I'm a mass comm major at that time. Like, this has nothing to do with what I want to do. I went to a liberal arts school. So I actually shifted at that point, and I still kind of had that mindset that I was fortunate enough at ages 17 to 21 when I was in college that I got those values of being on my own, because I was fortunate enough to have that, right? So there is something that is there. You doing it at 27, it's not the same thing,
No.
right? So that is the difference. When you're doing that, and I'm living on campus, I'm away from home, those are some of the things that the higher learning side of it is that I feel as though that there are values there to being able to be out there if you have the means, right? Like, so you have maybe the parents that got you there, you had the grades that got you there because you were college prep or whatever, but you're able to get to that point where I was now 17 years old, living on my own with I had one high school friend that was one of my roommates, but I was meeting all these people, and I'm like developing all these social skills for better or worse. And it was a up and down struggle for me. First world problems, but it was like me being a teenager, still an adolescent at that
Right.
point, which anymore we don't think that 17, 18 years old is an adolescent. Like, you absolutely don't know who the fuck you are.
Oh, no, not at all.
You're like, not talked down. In your 20s, you don't know who the fuck you are in most of your 20s, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, you're 27, 28, so like you're figuring out still like who you
Oh,
were
yeah.
at 21, but when you were 21, you thought you knew who you were. It's absolutely, it's all relative. There are values to the different ways you go about it.
I like that term you used, the college trade school.
Yeah.
I kind of like that because
Mhm.
there are some jobs out there that, like, if you want to go into that field, like, you do need a college education. I think what would help a lot of people out there was if college education actually focused on what that person wanted to go into. For example, you were a sociology major. If you'd have gone into college, like, I'm going to major in sociology, and then you take all the required courses for sociology and forget all the other bullshit you had to take with it, I think that would have been much
So
more
with
helpful.
that though, you're actually trusting that 17, 18-year-old that they fucking know what they want to do the rest of their life. That's the one value I'll give on the liberal arts or the overall education. If you are in those formative years, that person I was a mass comm major. I switched majors, and then I just crammed. I literally took intro to soc and 3 200 level courses my junior year just to get through it in 4 years.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about sociology. Now, and I knew this at the time, it was like, let me go back to this whole thing of, and we haven't really talked about it, is that I went to Miami University, and you really have to go back to what what university stands for, like why it's called that.
University versus a college, you mean?
Yeah, university is literally the root of it is the study of the universe. This is classic learning. This is literally, you don't know what you're doing, so you go into a university. And I'm not saying it's practical from the trade side or whatever else. I also think there's a lot of assumption on, like, there are countries out there, you literally take those standardized testing. It's like, all right, so you're going to be this, you're going to be this, you're going to be this. We are still in that country where you can just do it and waste all your money. I did know at that time when I switched to sociology and I was 19, turning 20, because it was between my sophomore and junior year. And it was one of those things that I knew that if I really wanted to do something in that field, I had to do grad school, I had to get a master's and probably a PhD to do anything. And most likely it would be either teaching or working for some sort of study organization on big projects. I didn't like school enough. I was fortunate enough. For me, my personal story is, and it's not always like, it's not turned out into millions of dollars at this point, but it's something that it's like, this was, I really did at that time. I don't know why I had that thought process that this was a training tool on how I thought about people. And in my previous career, I moved up the ranks because I learned how to critically think. I learned how to actually like assess problems and problem solve, which is lacking in so many, like the capabilities. You can make more money being in a trade school. And sometimes you have that, like working on cars or whatever else, you have that. But the lacking part of that is that if you want to own your own business or you want to actually hire people and actually manage people, but you know how to work on cars, you don't know how to do the rest of it, and you try to be like, I'm going to open up my own garage, you will fail more likely owning a business that way. You know what I mean? I can drive a truck. I know how to load a truck. Cool. I know how to like move furniture. I know you're in the trucking industry. I know how to do that. But to actually run it, do the logistics side of it, there is other training. There's actually, but the critical thinking, again, this is going back to what I was saying with Karen about, you know, how the relearning of how to learn is, there's also a lack of, if you just go full blown trade, you know what I mean? If you go full blown, like you're 17, 18 years old, it's like you're this major, this is the rest of your life. You're also pegging yourself into a certain hole a lot of the times, because if you don't do the broader things, I'm not talking about like astronomy. I took an aeronautics course and it was like kind of cool because we did a report on an F-22 Raptor. Really kind of cool. Like that was fun, right? But all I remember from that class is that the professor was super awkward because he was super smart and all he did was jingle coins in his pocket. Like 20 years later, I remember that.
So
That's
what
the
if,
education there.
my thing is, what, and I mean, this is of course a big what if, but what if you could go and do all of your general education courses, just general education. You had to take a certain amount of courses and you could get an associate's degree. I know that you can do that. You can get an associate's of business, but what if instead of you have your high school GED, cool, you get your diploma, whatever, you could have a general associate's degree to say, I did higher education. Now, if you want to dabble in business, that can be one of your courses that goes towards a generalized associate's degree. But then you do all of your writing, you do your math, whatever, your literature, your history, you get your associates, and then you have the opportunity to dabble in, okay, I didn't like this, but I liked biology. I'm going to take another biology course, and then I have my associates. So now I have a degree in generalized higher education. If I wanted to be a biologist, well, guess what? It's only 2 more years to get your bachelor's. Then you focus on all of your bachelor's courses, which is just the straight biology and everything else you need to do with that. But then it's only a 2-year step afterwards. So then I did my higher education. I should have had a biology degree from Ohio State. Do you want to know the reason that I didn't finish? Because
Yes, we do.
I know
Yeah.
you do. Because
Rhetorical, I think.
I would have had to have taken, so at Ohio State, they require you, if you want to get a bachelor's degree in biology, a BS, not a Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor's of Science, I had to have 3 years of foreign language. I took Spanish 1 and 2,
Yep.
or I took Spanish in high school, tested out of Spanish 1, took Spanish 2 my freshman year. And then by the time that I was almost done, I was going to take Spanish 3. And my credit from Spanish 2, because it had been 5 years, didn't qualify anymore. So I couldn't take Spanish 3. So I would have had to restart, and it would have pushed me back a year
Yep.
because I would have had to take them all in a row, and I couldn't test out of it because it had been too long. So I could have had a bachelor's degree in biology if I didn't need to take Spanish. And I understand why they want you to take a foreign language, but at the same time, I don't need Spanish in order to do biology.
I
Correct.
took a year of ancient Greek in order to get
How's that
my-
helping you?
None whatsoever.
How
There
much
you go.
do you remember a lot?
No,
Can you
Yeah.
do the Greek alphabet?
not entirely anymore.
There you go.
But I either had to do a cross cultural trip or a year of a foreign language. And the cross cultural trip that I had wanted to do was already booked up. And I had taken Spanish in high school and still couldn't speak Spanish after 3 years of it in high school. And one of my professors that I actually liked was teaching ancient Greek, and it was literally translating the New Testament. That's all it was. And I was like,
Wow.
that's what I'm going to do. I'm going
All right,
to take that.
Let me say again, this is one of those things, and you know, not really one to look up to about a lot of this stuff, but here's how the hopeful side of it, right? So I agree with you, right? So I took French for 3 years in high school. Don't remember a lick of it now. I took ASL for 2 years in high school. Don't remember much of it, and enough to get me in trouble until I talked to someone that's deaf, and they're like thinking I know sign language, and I don't. So I have to explain that. But I got to college. I was a mass comm major, and I remember I was like, all right, I'll just test out of French, maybe. And I was a mass comm major, and my dad's like, oh, you want to get into broadcasting? Because, yeah, okay, cool. How many French stations are in the U.S.? I was like, that was my dad, right? Just a little bit brash, but obviously right.
Well, I used to make
So
fun
I
of
took
Jester.
Spanish, but in those Spanish classes, I met a couple friends. Again, this is just the growing period, right? This is how life works, and that it sucks that it costs so much money. And at the time, again, 20 years ago, it doesn't cost as much as it does now. But during that time, I understand. I completely agree with what you were saying, Karen. But at that time for me was I met a good friend named Alex Grant, and I met him in Spanish, and it was always a game because I've never smoked weed, but him and his buddy Jesse, actually, it was like a game. It's like, are we high this class? I was like, yeah, you're high because you're answering every question. You know what I mean, it's like one of those things. They're like, yeah. And they aced it, right? And I'm like struggling. I remember I went into like Spanish 202. This is 4 semesters of Spanish. And when I turned to my final, and I'm like, hey, how am I going to do? And the teacher was like, oh, you're going to be fine. I was like, well, I just know I struggled. And I still remember as she's scrolling across, this is in a small lecture hall, and she's like scrolling across my grades, and I could see like her eyes just went dead. She's like, we'll see how you did on the final. But the one thing about it is that I met Alex, and then we became friends, and he was a sociology major. He explained sociology to me, and I was like, that sounds really interesting. And at that point, I was actually at a almost fail or pass in my college, and I was like, mass comm's not what I thought it was going to be at this school. Sociology really sounds interesting. I actually understand that. I can appreciate that school of thought. We talked more and more about it, and that's why I switched majors, and I did graduate within 4 years. Maybe it's not the best way to do it, but what you were talking about now, it's like I had a bachelor's degree, and I could get a job in a cubicle probably. But then my path took a different way, and I just kept working at the moving company that I was at, and I was able to use the skills I learned. As they're not like trade skills, but I learned the things I said, critical thinking, all that stuff that I actually excelled at that career because of the way I learned how to think about people. I guess it comes down to, and this is a cop out, but there's no right way to do this.
No, there's not. But I think there should be more options than what we're given right now, because I
100%.
think a lot of it isn't working for the mass majority of, especially like
100%.
people trying to go back to school, people that are my age, people that are in high school, kids that are trying to look at it. And I know people that are like, yeah, I don't want to go to school because I don't want $150,000 of debt.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't blame you.
No,
That's why, like, you know, I'm 27, I'm almost 28, and I'm in school, but I'm paying for it the best that I can because I don't want a bunch of loans. I don't want that.
Right.
I used to make the joke when I first got into the cigar industry, and when I was a sales rep for a cigar company. I used to make the joke that I used my biology degree more selling cigars than I did in 8 years doing preclinical toxicology research. Because even though I had that degree with the word biology on it may have gotten me into that job, but I never used that education whatsoever in 8.5 years I was in that industry. But then I go sell cigars, and all of a sudden that biology education is like, oh yeah, botany, that plays a role in this. And I used it more selling cigars than I had ever done before. And so I sit there sometimes and look at, you know, the path that my life has taken. And, you know, I question whether I should have gone to school or whether I should have learned a trade or right out of high school had gotten a job in an industry. Because the company I work for now, there was a gentleman that used to work with me. He and I actually used to be on the same team together. There was twice that he beat me out for positions, even though he had no higher education whatsoever. He had military experience.
Oh.
He was 8 years in the Army. And so my employer in those two positions that he and I both interviewed for, they put more emphasis on that than they did my education. Now, granted, he was also a better bullshitter than me. So that kind
That
of
gets
helped.
you a long way.
Yeah, oh
Trust me.
yeah, absolutely.
Trust me, I know.
Oh yeah, being a great bullshitter gets you in a lot of jobs.
Throw a degree behind that. You'd be all right. You'd be all right.
Yeah, you just got to make shit up.
All right. So this is the time of part two. This is where we get to closing remarks. Or do you have something?
I thought you were.
Yeah, this is Corey. I'm 30.
Other
Turn
other
around
side
to
of the mic.
The duct tape on the mic there. Yeah.
Electrical tape.
I'm 33, and I think the issue with most kids my age or in their early 30s,
You're not a kid anymore.
well, most kids my age still act like a kid.
Fair.
You know,
Yeah.
they graduate, they have
Fair.
a degree, they live at home, and the first thing you want to do is get another degree, or they're looking for a better offer because they're educated. And I think the balance of what makes it work is the experience aspect. Get any entry level job you could get, put in the hours and time, earn your bones, then apply the degree. But,
That's a great point.
but most kids my age don't want to do that. They're like, I got
No.
a degree. I should be an executive. I should be,
They
Yeah.
think they know
Company.
everything because they
They know
went to
everything.
they know everything because they did the 4 years. They're fine. But it's
But
just-
now, it
The old
used to,
promise. Yeah, you're right.
it used to be 50 years ago. Not everyone, 50 years ago, only people that could actually afford to go to college were going to college. So having a college degree held a lot of weight 50 years ago. Nowadays, because of, and I put the blame specifically on federally insured student loans, because of those student loans, now everybody graduates and go to college, and it diminishes the value of that education. Because now when you go for a job interview right out of college, guess what? Everyone you're going up against has the same education you do.
Yeah.
But maybe someone who has actually been in that field right out of high school, starting from the ground up, putting in the work for 4 years while you were going off getting a degree. Well, that person has experience. And a lot of times that experience can hold more weight than that degree. Like someone who graduated high school and then is like, you know what, I'm going to teach myself how to code. And they sat there and spent years learning how to code. And all of a sudden they're 22 going for a job interview versus someone who just graduated with a degree in IT. Well, who's actually been using that IT education more? The guy that's been doing it the last 4 years, not the person.
It's always the time frame too. I had a lot of people again and again in the early 2000s graduating, early to mid 2000s. Computer science, CIS was the whole major, right? And it was like I had a friend, several friends actually that were CIS majors because that was like the hot thing at that time because the internet was really, really going crazy and everything was going online. And then it got watered down, like Jess is saying on the comments. And all of a sudden they couldn't even find a job because that's what everyone did. Now you have an overpopulated field. So it's just like anything else in life, though. It's like you got to play your cards right. I mean, that's how it works. But you said, it's part of what? How'd you say it?
The old promise.
The old promise. So you get into it. You're like, oh, if you do this, you get this job. And it's like, well, again, do a 4-year degree. A lot changes in 4 years. All right, Scott, go ahead, and then we got to go closing remarks and
As
round
I
it
say,
out.
when
Take my
I-
closing remarks.
something that I learned from a social worker that I worked from. He said that you can have a degree, to the right, but you may get a job to the left.
Right.
And basically, what a degree tells employers is that you are trainable.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, what your degree is.
You've
in.
accomplished something.
Yeah, you've accomplished something. You're trainable. So it doesn't matter if you have a degree over here in finance or whatever, and you apply for a job doing something completely and totally different. The only thing they're worried about is, are you trainable? And that's what a degree tells them is you're trainable. and that's that's the bottom line.
I think that's what we like. I agree with that. And I think what we've learned, like in this conversation and everything, like what we're seeing today is that the powers that be, the system, the machine, has capitalized on that.
Mhm.
Clearly, I mean that's where we're at. Again, I graduated high school in '98. That's one of the things. Like I took college prep. If you couldn't hack it in college prep, you went to the vocational school, and those kids were nice, but they're a little rough around the edges. This is again suburban high school, and those people are now doing well. And the people that fall into that is the turn that we're doing. Is that there's always this equalizing aspect of it, is that the trade schools will become more advantageous. But the truth of the matter is, at least I think in this country, you're talking about people wanting to have things given to them, is that you still not
you can't be
everyone
given
wants,
an education.
You can't, but not everyone wants, like, yeah, you can make more money being an electrician or a plumber or anything like that. Do you want to be a plumber? And so if you have the promise of, hey, you have this cushy lifestyle of, just going to a cubicle, sitting behind a desk, and then they don't tell you that you're going to have heart problems and heart disease and obesity and all that stuff because you're doing that. And then all of a sudden you're going to die early. You're probably going to go through like 2 divorces because of that. You know what I mean? It's like, these are the things that come with that. That's not in the pamphlet, right? All the hardships that go into the desk life and everything else is like, oh, but as long as you have good health care, you want to have good health care because you're going to be on 15 different pill bottles by the time you're 54.
Which is why you want me as a nurse, guys.
So then Karen comes in and she's going to prescribe those things. Yeah, it's full circle. All right, Sean, and then closing remarks.
All right, I'll turn off after this. I just, given my background, I went to college but never graduated from with a degree, but I've been in aviation for over 30 years, dealing with private charter and stuff like that. And I've gotten to a point, kind of what Nate brought up, with all the years of me doing that, where when I was looking for a job, they didn't give a shit if I had a degree or not. They looked at my experience,
right,
to what I had.
Certain trades will do that.
Yeah, and I didn't, like, I have some college, but never really, but I fell into it when I was like studying college. So I was learning a lot in the aviation industry while I was going to school.
Right.
So I just took that on as, it used to be all about wanting to have a degree, like you said. And I remember, I guess to a point now, it's like, what is it that you're good at, and when you can learn outside of school and become valuable to a company. So just,
that's good.
Sharon, that's it. You can turn it off. No more.
Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Anyone else? Nate, go ahead with your closing remarks.
So I think one of the things that is important now with the way the education system and how that plays a role in the job field is now, I think the earlier you can figure out what it is you want to do, the better. If you can figure out while you're in high school what it is you want to do, like if you want to go work in a business industry, okay, then you either get a job working for a business or you go to school to get a business degree. If you want to be a laborer, if you want to be a plumber, a welder, something like that, if you can figure that out early, then you go do the trade school and get that education and experience as quickly as possible, instead of waiting until you're 30, 40 years old before you figure out what it is that you want to do in life. I think the earlier you figure that out, the more advantageous it is for you in the long run.
Kids.
But that should, no matter where you are in life or what you're doing, you shouldn't stop learning.
That's a good point. I agree.
Because if all you've ever done is, like, my dad worked for UPS for 34 years. 28 of that was as a package truck driver. So my dad has no college education, but he's really good at driving a truck. Now there's only so much he can do with that, but in his adult life, he's also read. He's also kept up with current events, not just, locally, but also statewide, nationally, internationally. So like he reads, so that way he actually knows what's going on, because the more you educate yourself, the more value you can bring to a conversation or to a business. The one quote I had seen in an article was education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Because the more education doesn't necessarily have to be formal,
Right.
but the more you learn about different things that are going on, the more impact you can have. Do you know who said that quote? You want to take a guess?
Nietzsche.
Nelson Mandela.
Steve Crane.
Michael Scott.
Nelson Mandela, Michael Scott.
But no, I mean, when you're young, an education can put you on a certain path, but you need to make that choice if that's the path you want to go in.
Right.
And I think sometimes we're asking too much of 17 and 18-year-olds to make that decision at that age. Like, there's nothing wrong with graduating high school, working until you figure out what it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
Like, Steve, instead of going to school and spending 2 years in mass communications, you could have still worked in the moving industry and then be like, you know what? I want to do sociology, and then have gone to school to focus on sociology and still been working, but now you have that experience and that education to go with it. You're not spending those 2 years, I don't want to say waste, but you learned a lot of stuff in those first 2 years of college that you didn't need to, I would say.
It's fair.
But then you figured out what it is you actually wanted to do, and you buckled down, and that then has helped you since then.
Karen?
You go first.
No, Steve
No.
goes last.
You can't do that. I'm the host.
Everyone knows the rules.
I don't know. Overall, I think it was a very interesting topic that we just discussed, and I'm actually glad that it's stuck. I don't really know. I mean, I feel like I'm just going to go on another tangent. So I'm
fair.
just going to keep it very, very short.
Yes, you got somewhere to be.
That's it. Thanks, guys. I'm out. I'm good. Keep learning. That's
You're
it.
the only one. You're
Those
the
Philly
only
guys
one
are-
on the panel that's actually still
Those
in
Phil-
this
those Philly
stage
guys
right
are
now.
ball busters.
I mean, it just
No, it's muted.
it's tough. Everyone knows that it's tough, and obviously it's just a matter of opinion. There's no right way to learn for every single person, and that's obviously what makes it very, very complicated. I'm very curious to see what happens in the future after, the technology is just so rampant and crazy of how fast it's changing. I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens, and I hope it goes in a very positive direction and keeps kids engaged. I hope kids keep going for the arts and the sports and thinking outside of the box instead of just doing everything technologically and just looking at a computer screen. Even though, like, when I was that age, that's all I wanted to do was go home and play on the computer. But now I'm like worried about my kids, like, not wanting to do sports and just wanting to, get in
outside.
virtual reality. Well, why would I go outside and get tackled by this guy when I can just sit and play FIFA all day? That's what I'm worried about for my kids. And I'm just like, man, I can't imagine what's going to happen with learning and how I'm going to want to, if I'm going to even have options as a parent when it comes to that for my kids, is to say, this is how I think you should learn versus what is just able to be accessed by education in the future. So I'm just going to stick it through and see what I can do. And hopefully, I make it through, but we'll see. But
You're gonna do well.
I hope we'll see.
The way
Yeah.
it's trending, by the time you have kids, everyone's going to be a lineman.
Everyone.
So we have some people listening from other countries, and I think that the education system in this country is obviously very flawed, and it happens over time. And we've talked about a lot of that. Is that at one point a high school diploma was one thing, and then the college degree was the next. 2-year education, 4-year education, all that stuff. Now it's the waters have been muddied because now that's the new high school diploma, right? So now a master's degree. It's never ending. I think we have gotten to the breaking point that a lot of it has been exposed because of the financial burden.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, just like anything else, follow the money, it's going to happen again. So now it'll level back out to a point, and I think that's what we've seen, that there were comments on the feed about like vocational schools and certain, professions that are actually, if you look financially, less financial burden and more financial gain if you want to be in some of those trades. That's clear. So it'll take some time. But again, based on my life story, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of ups and downs because that's how it always works. But Nate, you highlighted that is that the continuing education, any profession you're in, you have to obviously educate yourself. You never stop learning, right? So again, me being in the trivial to a lot of people profession of being in the tobacco industry, you have to constantly learn. If you stopped 5 years ago, I don't know any of the new cigars. I can't be a reliable source. I can't do the first part of this podcast. You can't be a reliable source if you just stop learning in any field. Nursing is a big part of that. If you all you're reading are textbooks or that library card or doing the same courses that you did, people did in 1995, there's so many advances, right? So even when you graduate from the nursing school, if you pursue that career, it's continuing education, right? Same thing with like even teachers.
Well, most of those you have to do continuing education.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things. Like, so my ex-wife she's a teacher still, right? And she graduated with a graduate degree, and we met in college. So again, life things that happen during these stages, there's no right way to do it. What I will say, the big summary for me on a lot of this part about the learning methods and all that stuff is, all I know is that when the powers that be, I use the term mandate, not because of what's going on, but if they mandate the one way of learning or the one thing, like, if you look at 14-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and it's like, what do you want to be? Or you classify as this person, there is a absolute ignorance or a neglect for the fact that every decade, call it, every 5 years, 10 years, you are a different person. Life has now influenced you that you didn't have in those stages. So what you thought you wanted to be at 15 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old, 30 years old, Shannon is a great example. And I'm sorry to bring you into this, but it's like, you did your career for how long? 23 years. He was doing this and he was successful, but he realized that his life was not what he wanted to be. Now, to tell if you had a child at 12, 14, 15 years old, and you're saying you need to know what you want to do for the rest of your life, you're a hypocrite because you know that was not the case for you. And your life story is different than them. Generations. That's the funny thing. It was kind of said, like Scott, you were talking about, that your parents, your dad had this influence on you. I think we highlighted this to a point that it's like, this is an age-old thing. In the last 100 years, in this country, and I'm sure in other countries, I know they're different, but in this country, it's like the previous generations always look at the newer generations as they don't know shit about shit, and they think they know better. And when we were in that stage, we thought we knew everything about everything. And the truth of the matter is, we didn't know shit about shit. You know what I mean? I don't care if you know how to, at age 5, you know how to turn on an iPad now and know how to actually do all this stuff that I don't know how to do. But when it comes out to the real world, you have skills that I don't have, and now you have to actually combine it. And that's where it really comes into it, is that it's that open learning side of it, on not only the learning side, but the teaching side of it. And this quick fix mentality that I feel like we have of the education system and everything going on right now is that it's like, we got a quick Band-Aid and we'll fix it tomorrow. So this generation is going to be fine. The harsh reality of it is, and this is to some people, a very negative viewpoint. The current generation, if you don't think that they're on the right path, that's fine, because you got to correct it, but you're steering a boat. You're not just taking a quick right or a quick left. It's not this generation. You have to make an impact and really kind of grow this one so that hopefully in 2 generations we'll have a better outcome. And that's what I think the education's all about. The education system's all about, is that best practices that I mentioned earlier. So for my closing remarks is that you constantly have to be open to what are the best practices of what you thought was right and what you think is wrong, because sometimes you'll be actually corrected by the youth or the people that are younger than you that are going to be like, no, you just don't understand. And if you stop listening, you stop learning, you'll stop progressing. And now you just got 20, 30, 40 years of just basically being who you are. That's fine. Hopefully you're healthy and you'll just be a miserable person most of the time. But if you actually listen to both sides of it and there's an open dialogue, just like a lot of aspects of life, now this is where you actually have a growing period of both the older generations and who you're actually educating so that you can actually learn from each other. But I do agree with the fact that there is an aspect that you do have to respect your elders. And that is a old school way of thinking, is that if you respect your elders to a point that they did learn a lot of the life lessons that have not changed. Technology can change, all the things can change, but life lessons don't. And you actually learn, and I always talk about start with your small circle and build your way out. The biggest problem right now, I think, that we have that we really need to steer the boat elsewhere is the fact that everyone's starting big, because with the technology and the social media and with everything else and the mass media and the in our country, the federal government trying to dictate what works for cities and also rural counties that we're talking about, that it all works the same. That's ignorant and it's not effective. So really, it is really starting with the home and building your way out. And it's not always easy, and life isn't fair. And there's going to be people that are dealt a bad deck of cards. But if you work on the bigger system on the education side of it, hopefully then the best practices will prevail and we'll have a bigger majority of children that in the next 2 generations will really actually strive, and there'll be a little bit more of that equal opportunity side of it, as opposed to slapping a program and a Band-Aid on something. That's my closing remarks.
Good job.
Thanks. Cheers, guys. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. No,
I don't have any.
no. Pour something. We got to wait for Whiskey Thursday. You got to pour something in your glass. You can't cheers with an empty glass.
It's bad luck.
Thanks to our sponsors while she pours that. Tinder Box at Easton, Altadis USA, Cigar Company, and patreon.com/Bourbon and BS Podcast. And cheers. Happy Whiskey Thursday. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.